Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast. Big episode 200. Can you believe it? Can you believe that it's been 200 weeks of a weekly podcast, he says? Oh, oy vey. So unfortunately, earlier this month, I got sick kind of recently, right? I complained about that earlier. Well, I got hay fever, which I feel is almost worse. Cause I realized that I think Kat did not know that hay fever was not like a real fever. I had to keep explaining to her that I was not actually sick. I just had allergies, and that's why I feel like it's worse. Hay fever is just your body tricking you into thinking that you're sick, which is really annoying because I don't have a temperature. I have I'm really mucusy, but it's really thin and clear. It just sucks. You just feel like shit it fucked me up for a week. It was really annoying. But now I'm better. I am over the pollen. Also, the other way that it messed me up was that I got some allergy. We were totally out of allergy meds. We got some more from the store, and then I didn't realize that they had a side effect of major drowsiness. So also cue screwing up my sleep schedule for a good week. I finally I woke up at 9:30 this morning, and I felt good. I felt fine. I got some chores done. I cleaned up my room and all that a little bit. I cleaned it up a little bit. I got rid of all the goddamn snot rags that were just that I didn't have the energy to clean up. And now I feel good, and I can finally record this landmark 200th episode. What a fun way to start the podcast. Oh, here's something that's more fun. Here's a more fun thought that I had. So this past week, there was the BAFTAs, the British Academy of Film and Television Awards, and there was this racial incident where, during a presentation of one of the awards, two of the presenters, it was Jamie Foxx and what's his Delroy Lindo, who are two fantastic actors who were in Sinners, which is a great movie from 2025 that I think I talked about it on the podcast. Great movie. They were on stage to present an award, and in the front row, I guess at the show, they had some kind of a movie about Tourettes or something, and someone involved with the film who has Tourette's was in the front row, and it took over, and he just shouted the N-word at them, and it's a really weird moment. It's very strange. Jamie Foxx looks almost like kind of shell-shocked. He was just confused. They both of them just look like, what? What just happened? Did that really happen? And it's it's just a bad situation. It's just a bad situation all around. And it sucks because really, if you know anything about Tourette's, it really is not in your control. It's literally a condition where parts of your brain, there's forms of Tourette's. The reason why there's that stereotype of people, cursing because they have Tourette's is because there's literally a part of your brain that knows I shouldn't do something. And whatever way that the brain gets rearranged, I'm not a super duper expert in this, but the brain is essentially arranged in such a way with Tourette's syndrome that you compulsively go there. And so people will say things that they really don't mean, that they know they shouldn't be saying, and that they might very well disagree with, but they just can't control it. And it sucks for them. I'm sure it's very embarrassing. And it's weird for the people around them, and it's just really unfortunate that it happened on that stage with those people. But I was thinking, man, it must, what must suck even more, maybe, is, what if you had Tourette's like that, but you were actually racist? And every time you tried to say something, everyone was like, oh, he doesn't mean it. No, it's just his brain doesn't work the right way. Like, you're trying to spit some real racial hatred, and everyone around you refuses to take you seriously. Like, imagine, like, could you imagine being in the position, like, your body is a prison? No. No one will ever believe you that you're actually racist. What an incredible, that feels like it could be a South Park episode. Like someone runs for mayor and they're actually just mondo racist or like bigoted in some other way, like against gay people or something, and they keep just shouting slurs, and everyone's like, oh, no, it's fine, it's his thing, it's his Tourette's thing. And then he gets into office and he's like, okay, gay marriage in South Park is now illegal, and everyone was like, whoa, I thought that was the Tourette's. I thought that was a funny idea. Like, I feel like maybe that might be like a divine punishment. If reincarnation is real, that might be a divine punishment for being racist your whole life, is now you don't get reincarnated into like a shitty animal or something. You just become someone with like Tourette's and no one ever believes you. You try to go to the clan meeting and they're like, all right, buddy. Yeah, okay. Sure. Get out of here, man. Don't make a fool out of us. Anyway, a few episodes ago, I suggested that for the 200th episode, because I really had no better ideas, that you fine people in the audience could suggest topics for me to talk about. Which is actually really similar to a thing that I just let you guys do anyway, which is ask questions. But hey, I've been sourcing some audience topics. We have 3 from one person and then 1 from another person. So I'll jump into them just like in the order, I believe the order that they came in. I should have the tabs up. So the first 3 of ours come from Skets. First question being, how about the influence of the military-industrial complex on games throughout the decades? I know you've probably got a lot to say after briefly touching upon it in that Gamers Show episode you did, and the American Army game for Xbox, which featured. Sure. So, it's a fun topic. So, the military-industrial complex is something which I think in its modern form has really existed since the 1940s, especially in America. Once we figured out that you can actually make a ton of money by having a war go on for forever. Well, actually, I say specific people can make a lot of money. And it also happens to dovetail really well with imperialist policies where you just like loot and plunder and rape other countries. So, that affects many aspects of society. As for video games, actually, the first one that I go to in my mind is actually probably from one you guys are probably familiar with if you've watched the most popular videos on my channel, which is I covered it in the Yakuza video, and that is the fact that Sega only exists in its modern form because of World War II. I guess to quickly go over, if you guys don't remember, or if you somehow have not, or listening to this podcast and you haven't actually watched it's actually now my second most highly viewed video. The Rogue Warrior one beat it out a little while ago. But Sega was founded it was an American company. It was founded by Americans in Hawaii. And Sega actually stands for Service Games, which is, I always found very strange because that's an abbreviation. That's more of a Japanese style of abbreviation because of the way that Japanese characters work, where they're syllabic. So they'll abbreviate things by like syllables. For instance, like we might shorten Street Fighter to SF, and they'll say Suto because it's Sutorito Fighter. But yeah, it stands for service games because their primary business model was that they supplied gambling machines and arcade machines and pinball and stuff like that, amusement machines, to American military bases in Hawaii. Now, naturally, after Pearl Harbor happened and we entered the war, and this was in the 40s, or this was in the 30s actually that they were founded. Uh, Big business, big recruitment. We had a draft. However, after the war, during the 50s, there was a new law passed that is, I forget the specifics of it, but it essentially placed new limitations on importing gambling machines across state lines. So they were still technically allowed to operate in Hawaii, but they couldn't import any new machines, which was basically a death sentence for their business that all operated on it's like a novelty business. So they were like, okay, if we stay here, the business is going to die. It's going to slowly like rot and get stale. There's going to be competition elsewhere. What do we do? And they looked to Japan because there was this loophole, which was that the you could not import gambling machines across state lines. However, that didn't include American territories. It counted for American states, but not territories or bases that we had overseas. And so because the Japanese economy, we were pouring a lot of effort into rebuilding their infrastructure and their economy, and we had military bases over there, and it was a pretty popular, now peacetime place to be. They basically saw that it was a fresh, growing market, and they moved Sega over to Japan. And then over time, just Ship of Theseus, it became essentially a Japanese company. So sometimes people will jokingly say that the atomic bomb created anime. That's not true. The atom bomb actually created Sonic the Hedgehog. So think about that. There's a direct line from the Manhattan Project to Chris Chan. So, you know, Oppenheimer's staring at the camera expression. But there's a couple other things with the military-industrial complex. You could tie it into the games industry. So you mentioned the America's Army, which was the very first free-to-play online shooter. It might have been the first free-to-play online game, to be honest. It beat League of Legends to the punch by about 10 years. But that was never, like, super... I don't think that was super popular. It definitely had a niche, and it definitely made the Army seem very appealing to a good number of young men. I think to actually... Something that I lived through specifically, which was the 7th console generation. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare... Modern Warfare. Advanced Warfare was later. It wasn't advanced, it was modern. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was this crazy time to live through. I know that everyone watching this is old and ancient, like me. We don't have any hip young kids listening to this show. I don't think anyone's listening to this who's in high school. That would blow my mind. That would actually blow my mind. But I'm sure that you remember as well as I do that, like, wow, that Modern Warfare completely changed the gaming landscape. And it did so, I think, primarily because it hit at the right cultural moment. In 2007, there was still a pretty strong, like, pro-war sentiment in the United States. Only being 6 years after 9/11 happened, a lot of people had just grown up in an environment where there was a massive hero worship for the military. The military are heroes. I remember in, like, Boy Scouts, we would write... Oh, my thing's tipped over. Okay, that was weird. Sorry. Sorry if the audio in the last few minutes has sounded strange. My microphone like tipped backwards. But the in Boy Scouts, I remember we wrote like I think letters for Christmas to troops in I don't know where they would have been stationed, Afghanistan maybe. That was still like a really prevalent thing. There was still even people who like were not. It was the propaganda machine for the war or the wars, the Middle Eastern wars that we did and are still doing, was absolutely absurd. It was absolutely crazy. I think that the Iraq war definitely was more questioned by people because if you were like paying attention, you were like, what the fuck? But Afghanistan, I mean, you cannot, especially if you're not American, it's almost difficult to really understand the psychic wound that was dealt to the American people by 9/11. And the demand for some kind of like a blood sacrifice in return for that was potent. And it's kind of weird that it actually took a while to capitalize on it in entertainment. I'm sure that it definitely existed in a lot of ways you could probably point to like a bunch of movies and stuff that more heavily featured military things. I'm not like a movie buff guy, so I'm sure that's there. But curiously, it really didn't hit games until Modern Warfare. And the absolute, like, ravenous success of that game in particular, I haven't played it, so I don't have an opinion on it. It's probably good. Is it so good that it defined video games for like 10 years? I don't know if it did that if it was able to do that on quality alone. It was really about the cultural moment and the thing that it capitalized on. I mean, especially if you're marketing it to kids. Like, okay, think about this. If you were 15 in 2007, you would have been like 8 or 9 when 9/11 happened. So you would have like grown up around all this stuff. That would have been fucking crazy. I don't remember 9/11. That happened technically before I was born, very shortly before I was born. The actual event, but I grew up in the aftermath of it, and I remember the cultural environment that I grew up in. I can't imagine actually living through it as a child. And then a couple years later, when you're like, you kind of fancy yourself to be a mature teenager, this thing comes out that's like so perfectly embodies basically like what you've been seeing in the world you live in and kind of gives you a chance to like play as the hero, let's say. And Modern Warfare was absolutely like, the 7th generation was defined by the brown military shooter set in some Middle Eastern country. That was a massive phase that the industry went through. It became just like, not even for any ideological reason. This is one of those things where I don't think that in isolation, I think that when you look at a lot of games in isolation, there's probably a lot of developers who are just like, oh, let's make a game that's like popular, and let's put it like this, let's make it like a modern warfare setting. That's probably what a lot of them thought of. That's probably how they would have described it. And to them, the modern warfare setting was the Middle East or North Africa. And so you get this weird collage then when you pull the camera back and you look at all these games and you go, wow, there were a lot of games from like 2007 to 2016, 17 that were just about killing Muslims. That's interesting. Huh. And I think it's also kind of interesting that we've sort of moved away from that aesthetic. We've moved away from that aesthetic. There's a couple other things like video games being used as training exercises in the military. I think that this is kind of one of those things that a lot of like news organizations will get wrong. They're not used for training because of like their realism or to train you to shoot a human being or something like that. They're used mainly for team building exercises. So there's that aspect to it too. I think that that's a little like, it's a little tertiary to the question. There's probably like way more. It's kind of wacky how embedded into our lives and our culture the military is. Isn't that strange? It's a little different. Like, I think it's actually really easy to make an answer to this question if you were asking about movies, because films notoriously have a buddy relationship with the U.S. military, because if you want to use tanks and planes and military equipment and probably uniforms and stuff in your movie, you need to like, well, the best way to get those props and stuff is to directly partner with the U.S. military, which obviously requires a certain level of positive representation. So for movies, it's obvious. I think that's been talked about quite a bit. It's a little less so in games because it's obviously all fake 3D models and stuff. But the subject matter, absolutely. Whether or not you think that it's reflective of the presence of the military, you could probably look at it in two ways. In some ways, it's reflective of the military propaganda of the time, and I think in that way it kind of becomes part of it as well. Even in games which criticize war or criticize the military, which there were, there's several Call of Duty games where the American military is not depicted in a positive light. From what I understand, it kind of varies by developer, because there's like 3 or 4 different Call of Duty studios, and apparently some of them are more or less pro-military, which is a really funny situation. I feel like it's a big topic. It's a big topic. I don't know if you could it's very broad. Those are the things that come to mind immediately for me. There's probably other things that are more economic that have to do with that I'm just like I just haven't made the specific connection, but it's a very interesting subject. You go in a lot of places with it. Okay, I'm coming in after finishing the podcast. I just realized this. I was looking over this topic of the military industrial complex, and there's 2 examples I forgot about. Tennis for Two, which is basically the first video game, if you want to call it that, from 1958, was developed on I believe it's called an oscilloscope. Now, the oscilloscope, so the whole backstory to Tennis for Two was that it was created so that it was like a professor created it at the University of Ohio, I think, or Utah, one of those, to get people excited about joining like the science program or the engineering program or something like that. And he made Tennis for Two to be like a crowd drawing thing at a school fair. And Tennis for Two, should be noted, was only possible because the military had developed computers to do physics simulations. I think that actually, I can't believe I forgot about this stuff, but if you're talking about video games, one of the biggest pushers for computer technology has been the military. They wanted, technology that could simulate things like missiles, right? And that technology was what created Tennis for Two. If you go back and watch a really, really old video of mine on the Play-Doh mainframe system, that was a mainframe system on the that was at the University of Illinois. And the origin of those systems was also basically, it was, you can tie it back to the military or to war, to really World War II. World War II had this massive influx of military recruiting because we had the draft. And part of that was, part of the incentive was the GI Bill. So you'd come back home and you'd get a free ride through college, which absolutely fucked up the job market in the long run, but hey. So now university used to be a kind of specialized track that you went on if you were interested in more academic pursuits or technical pursuits. University then became just like everyone goes. And the universities were not ready for that influx of people. And so one of the things that they looked towards was, well, maybe we can kind of make learning more efficient by using computers, which are a new thing. And this is the Play-Doh is from the 60s, was when the University of Illinois got it. Now, where did that technology come from? Well, it was actually research that was done by the military in order to do basic testing. So when you go into the military, you have to, there's like obviously physical tests and stuff, but there's also mental tests. You got to do some exams and stuff. And the military was like, how can we speed this up if we've got so many recruits? Hey, computers are maybe a possibility. I don't know if they ever really leaned into that, or I'm sure in some way they do now in the modern day. But mainframe computers were a result of the U.S. military trying to expedite exams for recruitment. And then that technology ended up in universities, and that technology was stuff like the Play-Doh. And the Play-Doh is where all the fucking, like, the original Rogals come from there, with stuff like D&D, or maybe the most important, well, D&D was probably then arguably an inspiration for the Oubliette, which was another game on the Play-Doh. The Oubliette inspired, the guy who made the Oubliette, I think him, or, oh fuck, I gotta get this straight. It was either he went on to make some other like role-playing games or something. I don't remember if it was computer role-playing games or tabletop games, but there is a line from the Oubliette to the guy who made that then inspired the fellow who made Wizardry, and Wizardry inspired Dragon Quest, which is all JRPGs. It's all JRPGs. So, yeah, there is a fucking weird, like, daisy chain connection of history between World War II, computer technology, and RPGs. So, like, that's a fucking real mind twister. What did I say earlier? I said something like, the atom bomb created Sonic. Well, Pearl Harbor created Cloud Strife. There is the butterfly effect is Pearl Harbor to Tifa porn in the Italian Senate. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Anyway, back to whatever I was talking about. I'll figure out where to edit this in. Next thing, this is in response to me getting my tooth pulled a little while ago. Did you keep the tooth? Did they let you keep the tooth? I've had 5 teeth extracted, and I hand-stitched them into my punk denim gilet? I don't know how to pronounce that. Along with various badges, my grandfather's military medals, father's army insignia, etc. An ex-girlfriend of mine nicknamed it the Bone Jacket. Given that technically it was now partially made out of human bone, are you going to convert your lone tooth into some sort of wearable item? A medallion of sorts hung from a leather cord, stitched into a cap or hat of some kind, on a charm bracelet, a dangle... Okay, you get the idea. I'm assuming they let you keep it. Some dentists are forced to dispose of teeth as being medical waste depending on where they operate. Even if they did not let you keep it, how would you choose to integrate it into a garment if you had to? So, that was a lot of words for me to say they did not let me keep the tooth. I actually asked them if I could after they pulled it. And he was like, yeah, we used to, but legally we have to dispose of it now because it could, like, have bacteria or something or whatever. But they did let me take a picture of it, so I've got a picture of the tooth sitting on the, what would you call it? On the table or whatever next to me. So I had that. Now, on the topic of if they did allow, in the fantasy world where they did allow me to keep the tooth, and I had to integrate it into some wearable garment, I'm going to be honest, the idea actually makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like combining biological matter into... For some reason, the idea of combining that into clothing makes me extremely uncomfortable. Like hair or anything like that. Makes me feel like weird, and the thought of it actually kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm not sure why. You know what I've also always hated? And I don't know if this is... I don't know if this is connected. I like to keep certain biological things separate. And I'm like, just let that be, let that be on the body. I've always hated, like, I've always been really, like, skeeved out by something where, like, a body part is, like, allowed to speak or personified itself. Do you know what I'm talking about? I remember... well, actually, now that I think about it, this is actually just kind of like gross in general. But on the Fairly Odd Parents, I think there was a character who had like a boil or something on their face, and it could like talk. And that was like, don't do that. Don't like give it a person. Like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about the idea of something living on my body, like a parasite or something. That's actually extremely uncomfortable to me. So, to answer the question, how would I integrate it into a garment? I would... What's like an easy way that I could like ignore that? This is like my answer to... See, I have like a really petty answer. Like, I would never get a tattoo, right? So I have a really petty answer if someone asked me what tattoo I would get, which is I would get like a really tiny little dot on like my back or something, or somewhere you'd never see that wasn't painful, so that it would like disappear within like a month. That's my really petty answer to that. I'm trying to think of something like an equivalent for this. The problem with a tooth is that it doesn't go away. It actually just stays there and rots. Let's say I'll just keep it in my pocket. Maybe I'll just keep it in my pocket. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll like... Yeah, maybe I'll like... What would you do? Maybe like sew it into like a breast pocket over my heart. And it'll be like in a movie when someone gets shot, but they have the medallion that their father gave them. And it protects their heart from the bullet wound. But I'm going to do that with my tiny wisdom tooth. The world's smallest bullet is going to be shot into my heart, and it's going to barely strike the tooth. And actually, the tooth is probably going to stab into me anyway because of that. I think that's what I would do. That's what I would do. And finally, from the last question from Skets, probably not very exciting for the 200th episode, but given your Genesis commentary here, as someone born well after the 16-bit wars ended, that being the SNES versus Genesis and TurboGrafx 16.2, I guess? Looking back with detached hindsight, which do you prefer? If you had to choose one as the only system you could play for a month with access to the entire commercial library, would you go Super Nintendo or Sega Mega Drive? Or would you go rogue and choose the TG16? The add-ons for each count 2, so you could have the Sega CD or Turbo CD, respectively, or even the 32X if you want. Oh, of course I'd have the 32X. You know I'm going to play... Knuckles Chaotix? That's the only 32X game I can think of off the top of my head. Was Cybermorph on 32X? Hang on. Cybermorph. Or was that CD? Was that Sega CD? Oh, it was Jaguar. Oh, I don't even remember. Okay, where did you learn to fly? Hang on, 32X games. I have to look this up for my own sake. There's only 40 of them. Afterburner Complete. Oh, Blackthorn? Really? Blackthorn was on. Did that not have a regular Genesis version? Oh, it was like an expanded version. Interesting. Corpse Killer. There was a Doom version. Fahrenheit? Okay, not the David Cage game, although it is an FMV. Okay. Primal Rage Space Harrier. Okay. There was a Virtua Fighter on the 32X? That's crazy, actually. Anyway, what was the question? Oh, right. So, which 16-bit hardware do you feel deserved to be number one back in the day? This was a tricky question because I never feel qualified to speak on like the full library of either of these. I've always been more of like a PC guy, as I've discussed. And so my console knowledge is a little bit limited. But just looking through and having played like a decent bit of the library of each one, I gotta go Super Nintendo. I'm sorry. I know that maybe that would be I feel like maybe the cool guy answer would be the Genesis. But I don't have very interesting hot takes. I think that the Super Nintendo holds up really well. If I just compare the library side by side, there's so many more games on the SNES side that I go, oh man, I do want to play. Oh, I would much rather play that. I just pulled up on like Nintendo Life. They just have a list. They have all Super Nintendo games. ActRaiser, Mario World, F-Zero, Terranigma, Link to the Past, Chrono Trigger, Goof Troop, Final Fantasy III, which is really 6, Tetris Attack, Earthbound, Star Ocean, Harvest Moon, Donkey Kong Country, Illusion of Gaia, Super Mario Kart, Zombies Ate My Neighbor, Secret of Mana, Mario RPG, Legend of the Mystical Ninjas, Kirby Superstar, Star Fox, Breath of Fire 2. I played the Game Boy Advance version of that. Super Metroid, Contra 3. Like, it just goes on and on. Killer Instinct, TMNT 4, Turtles in Time, Adventures of Batman and Robin, Soul Blazer, Kirby's Dream Course, Super Castlevania 4, Final Fight, Super Bomberman. I've heard Mystic Quest isn't that good. Mega Man. Oh my God, Mega Man X. Come on. And I'm like, oh man, like what I just listed out feels like enough to last an entire month. Play for a month with access to the entire... Like, if I'm on an island and I have the full SNES library, think about how many JRPGs I could blow through. I was looking up other people's thoughts on this when I was looking up, like, because I was like, which one sold more in the end? It was the Super Nintendo globally was much bigger in the end. And one thing that was pointed out that I realized was that the Super Nintendo, when you look at the various libraries, part of the strength of the SNES library is that it's all Nintendo games. Well, a lot of them are Nintendo games, and they're actually, more than that, they're part of franchises. Whereas many of the best titles on the Genesis were kind of like one-offs. Sega didn't quite oh my God, not Genesis albums. Dude, come on. I forgot that there's a band called Genesis. Sega never quite leveraged a lot of its properties. They didn't lean as hard into the second party stuff like Nintendo eventually did, giving a lot of the Donkey Kong titles off to Rare. So there's stuff, it's like Rocket Knight Adventures, and I'm like, I think that there's another one. Isn't there another one? There's 3 of those games, right? There's Rystar. How many Rystar games were there? Like all these games that are like perfectly good, but there's like a kind of lack of capitalization on them. Comics Zone. Never did anything more with Comics Zone. Why? Why not? There's the Shinobi games. A lot of sports games. This is like a side tangent topic. Have I talked about this before? I don't remember. But there's this kind of interesting historical, I don't know historical revisionism, but it's a historical bias. This shows up. So the historical bias, I think, is really, it's an interesting topic because there's a little microcosm. There's an example you can pull up with video games. So, for instance, like historians might look at someone from history who was very strong evidence that, let's say, they were gay or something. But because the historian isn't gay, and therefore either is, maybe sometimes they'd be homophobic, like that might be the case. But honestly, I think just as common it would be that it sails right over their head. They cannot even conceive of a homosexual. Therefore, the fact that this person was very likely gay, or there's a lot of evidence that this historical person was gay, gets completely ignored and swept under the rug. You know, like the poet Sappho is a really infamous example of this. Like this very clearly lesbian poet, and a bunch of like art historians for the longest time were like, oh, she was just really good friends with this one woman she lived with her entire life. Well, there's an example of that with video games. And I think that you see that in the Genesis versus Super Nintendo discussion. Because one thing that had to be pointed out to me was that one of the big advantages of the Genesis library over the Super Nintendo back in the day is that the Genesis had a bunch of exclusive sports games. They had a bunch of exclusive licensed sports games. There's a couple on the Super Nintendo, but the Genesis kind of had the corner on the market, and that was a big deal. If you were a kid who was into sports and you wanted to play with the real teams, and you finally like wanted to play with with good graphics, that was probably awesome, you know. I would much rather, if you gave me the choice, I would much rather play a 16-bit sports game over an 8-bit one, right? Just the animations get half the fun of sports games is just the fidelity, right? And that was a significant factor in the Genesis's library. But because a bunch of people who are into game history are big nerds like me who never played sports, that is completely ignored and glossed over. Because like when I'm looking through the Genesis library, I see something like, I don't know, what was it? It was one of the other, WWF Raw or something like that. And I'm like, my eyes just glaze right over it. I just skip it. Yeah, WWF Raw from 1994. I just completely glance over it. It might as well not exist. So there's an actual form of erasure that happens simply because the person reviewing the history is not interested in that aspect. Which is why it's valuable to get perspectives on history from multiple different people with different interests or who might be clued into different things. That's only mildly related. But yeah, I would absolutely pick the Super Nintendo over the Genesis to just like go through the whole, or at least like the best hits of the library. That's probably my that's my pick. That's my answer. And then finally, from questions, we have one from Gus. It says, "Hey T, hey G, during your time on YouTube, what was the coolest video project / research you came across?" And looking back, which video did you enjoy the most during your research? There are so many good ones. My personal favorites are The Art of Shinkiro, Sega and the Actual Yakuza, and of course the Brazilian Mega Man one, since it was cool helping you a bit. Congrats on the milestone 200. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you enjoyed those, and thank you very much. If no one remembers, Gus helped translate the editor's notes, the letters from the editor, in the Brazilian Mega Man videos. So he helped out with that. Now, as to what the coolest video that I, topic that I researched that I came across, and which video I enjoyed the most during my research, that's actually, there's been a lot of videos that I have really enjoyed that I really connected with. I think that a topic that really, I don't know if there's the same answer to both of these. Maybe I'll try to be more interesting and come up with a different answer, a slightly different answer for each of these questions. I think one that really took me by surprise was, oh man, I should have a faster answer for this. I should have thought more about this. I had it in my head, and then I read that there was like 2 questions. I think one of the coolest videos that I ever did of something that was really, really fun to research probably were the art history videos. I really like talking about. I kind of include this in there, but also Osamu Sato. He was a really fascinating person to learn about, because I only knew him from LSD Dream Emulator, and then actually finding out that he not only made several other games, but that he has this whole really interesting creative output. That he's a musician and a visual artist. He was probably one of the first people to actually do digital art. If you look at the timeline, like in the 80s, he was doing that stuff. I still use Osamu Sato's music in many of my videos. I literally just dropped some into the track on the current video that I'm working on. Another video that I really enjoyed was the manliest show in gaming. That one was really fun. I kind of like it was fun because one, it's a lot of fun to just like riff on something that's silly, but it's also an opportunity to kind of branch off and look at like, hey, here's a bunch of like little topics and little interesting tidbits to toss out while I'm kind of going over and making fun of this thing. The last great FMV game was something that I'd say, this is maybe for the second one. I think that my 2 favorite, the videos that I enjoyed the most were probably either, I would put it to the last great FMV game or Why Are Arcades Called Arcades? The last great FMV game was a really intensive process for me. I was very motivated to make that video. For one, it started just because, that video started out as me thinking, oh, well, this game seems interesting. And I was honestly expecting it to be really silly. I was expecting it to be kind of silly and maybe something that I could, poke a little bit of fun at. But I remember my first exposure to it was a video by, I think, Brutal Moose, forever ago when he still did video game videos, which old Brutal Moose videos were actually a big inspiration on me. And I remember the way that he talked about it. He didn't go very in depth on the game, but I remember just the way he talked about it was that there was a lot more to it than you might expect. And so I went into it with an open mind and, hey, maybe it might be fun to poke at. And then I found something that I genuinely thought was really interesting. And interesting in a sense that I felt like it is a perspective I rarely hear talked about. It was doing a lot of really creative things with the concept of the observer and voyeurism, and for me, I could see why someone might not be super into the concept, but the idea of like playing with who is the player in the game, what role does the player take on, it was really interesting to me. If you're not like a big video game art analyst nerd like myself, that might not be as compelling to you, but as like a study of the medium, I thought it was like, it really grabbed me. And then I got really into the story and analyzing the story and going through all the different permutations and the way that it's written and stuff. That was very engrossing. And then when I went online and I tried to actually find, this was another aspect, this was another factor. I went online after I finished the game and I was starting on the script, and or the notes really, and I tried to find discussion of the game, and I was really disappointed with the discussion of the game. It was either, a lot of it was negative. So a lot of it was negative, which people are entitled to. But whenever I read the negative criticism, I just really disagreed with it. I just did not, I felt like we almost played different games. I didn't disagree with the really scathing criticism, and I felt very dismissive criticism of the game. And then, on the other hand, the very small amount of positive discussion of the game was really shallow. It was people saying, oh yeah, it's fun for a few hours. It's entertaining. And it's like, all right, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you were entertained. You could find some entertainment in it, but no one was actually talking about what I thought was interesting about the game. So that was a really motivating thing for me to be like, not only do I want to provide some kind of like a critical counterpoint to a lot of the negativity surrounding this already pretty obscure game, but also like I want to I want to give it its time and actually engage with what I think it's trying to do and what I got out of it. I also felt that way about Harvester. Harvester was a really fun script to write. I really enjoyed analyzing that game because I've watched many videos on Harvester over the years, and I felt like I had a kind of a unique angle on it. I felt like I had, and I thought it was weird because I almost felt like a lot of people just didn't. I feel like a lot of the analysis of Harvester ends up being kind of shallow as well, not to call anyone out. But a lot of it ends up just being like, the game is about violence. Or it's like, oh, isn't this so weird? Isn't this wacky? What? And then like no one actually bothers to really engage with it on a thematic level. And what just drove me crazy reading analyses of Harvester is that like the game just tells you what it's about. Like, I can't believe how many discussions I've seen on Harvester, how many analyses I've seen and read on Harvester, and fucking no one brings up the Wasp Woman, who is just a character you can talk to immediately as soon as the game starts, who will just give you, like, the theme statements for what the game is about. She just tells you what the game's about, and no one ever brings it up. It's so weird. It's so weird how people just ignore that. So that motivated me to be like, the game says this. But the other video really that I enjoyed the most, that was a very memorable experience to make, was Why Are Arcades Called Arcades? That was one that started out as me just, I don't know if, I probably talked about this in the commentary track, but I don't know how many, I don't think that many of you are actually $10 patrons. So I'll share the backstory to the Arcades video here. So it really just started out as me asking the question in the title. Arcade is kind of a weird name. Where does that come from? And then I looked up the definition of the term arcade, and it was if it was not the modern day definition of like an amusement arcade, it was the not archaeological, architectural meaning, which is a series of conjoined arches. And that was just really strange to me, and I just kind of kept digging and digging, and I thought that it would be like maybe an interesting little video there. And it ended up becoming a really intense experience for me. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but the arcades video meant a lot to me by the end of it. It was a very emotional time for me. I really just kind of got lost. I really kind of lost my mind getting invested into the research for that video, because it started out with me reading about like, okay, there's this thing. I have the end and I have the beginning. I researched all this stuff about the origin of like, the architectural origins of arcades and how they ended up in various different places, what they're used for. And that also got me onto the stuff like, I thought that Palladio's life was really interesting. And then going back even further to his inspiration and reading about Vitruvius and Vitruvius's writings on architecture kind of stepped it up for me a bit, because Vitruvius, it wasn't just a technical thing. For him, architecture was not just a craft. It had a basis in his own personal philosophy. The Romans had this concept that they believed somewhat in the concept of souls. They called it the animus. And it was some kind of like, there's something in you. It's your consciousness or your mind or your soul or your spirit. There's just some kind of a special spark inside of people that is like different. It's kind of mystical, and it's what makes us different from an inanimate object. It's what makes us different from a puppet. So, but many of them believed, a very common belief in Rome was this idea that the soul resided in the body. The body was basically a shell for the spirit. And Vitruvius took this idea and he expanded it. Not only do our souls reside in our bodies, but if our bodies reside in buildings, then buildings must be equally as important. The relationships between different people and the foundation of a person's physical form is as important as the makeup of a building and the relationships between buildings to each other. And that's how he arrived. Like he was obsessed with the idea of form as a reflection or a means of gaining harmony with something inside. So like the Vitruvian Man, which you probably know from Da Vinci. Da Vinci kind of updated the Vitruvian Man, but the idea of that was Vitruvius's. Him saying these are the ideal proportions. This would be a perfect human body. That would be in complete harmony with itself. That's where you get the ideas of basically the three tenets of what a building should be. A building should be well built. First of all, it should be sturdy. It should be oh god, hang on. What were the three things? It should be sturdy. It should be useful. It should be useful. That's what it was. It should have everything in it should have some kind of a function. and it should be beautiful. And beauty is this like idea that is essentially like every component of the building agrees with itself and others, so that the whole building is a harmonious thing. And if you kind of and then if you take that idea and you extend it outwards, all of the buildings in a city, all of the buildings in a neighborhood themselves should not only agree, like the components within each building should agree with themselves. Therefore, the building agrees with itself. And they should also agree with each other across buildings. And in that way, you create an actual harmonious looking place. Like, I go outside and I live in the fucking Bay Area where people they just love to drop these big, I hate the way that they look. These big, awful, I can't even really call them modernist. I guess they'd be called modernist buildings. I'm not like an expert on the styles. That are just like big apartments, just big series of apartments, and nothing looks like it agrees with itself. Here's another one, actually. When I used to live in Chicago, we used to go by the Northwestern University campus. That is a place that is completely like disjointed in its architecture. There are modern ass buildings next to like old, much older styled architecture. And it clashes in such a weird way. It's a totally like dissonant campus to walk around. And I started getting into all these ideas. And I found them so fascinating. I'd never learned about any of this shit before. And I doubt, honestly, that most architecture students would learn about this stuff. I asked a friend of mine who actually went to college, and I kind of asked, like, is that something that they would learn about? And most of the feedback that I got, I think I asked a few people who, I don't know if anyone was an architecture student, but was like, probably not. You'd probably learn, like, the fundamentals and the technical stuff, and then you would learn, like, maybe a little bit of history, but you would not be delving into, like, the 10 books of Vitruvius or the 4 books of Palladio. Maybe if you took an architecture history class, maybe. But, you know, this was stuff that I had never heard of before, and I really resonated with these ideas. It reminds me, I'm reading the Anti-Oedipus right now by Deleuze and Guattari, and their whole model of, like, they were very rhizomatic in their worldview, in the sense that all... And the idea that there's no like there's not necessarily like the universe is not orientated in like an axiomatic way, but more so that everything could potentially connect to everything else. It's a model of the universe that's more of a dynamic, ever shifting system rather than something with a solid, like everything emanates from one thing, like God or something like that. And I think that I've naturally always gravitated. It's kind of ironic, gravitated towards outlooks like that. And Vitruvius really kind of reminded me, Vitruvius's writings really reminded me of that stuff. He, of course, he was the influence on Palladio. And I just love the historical aspect of seeing how something evolves from one point to the next. So that was fascinating. I mean, you walk outside and there's like local buildings that's like, oh, that like the local courthouse is literally a Palladian building. Like, it's a remnant of that, because we now have this cultural idea of what a courthouse should look like because of Palladio. They didn't do that in ancient Greece. Those were like temples. Palladio took those and was like, a government building should be like a temple. That was his idea. And then I had this, it's one of maybe the best moments I've ever had in the whole history of working on this channel. I was on the bus one day and I was facing a wall while researching the arcades video. And I was on the bus going to Kat's house, trying to figure out where the connective tissue was. I had the history pretty, like, I had it's pretty easy to actually go and research that stuff of the old, like, the history of the architecture, right? And the use of arcades throughout architecture. And of course I had the new stuff of, you know, amusement arcades and all that kind of thing. But I was like, where does it turn? Where does one turn into the other? How does this term for a series of archways become synonymous with like a building you go to play video games in that doesn't even have arcades? Archways, I mean. And I remember sitting there on the bus, just looking at my phone and just Googling like stuff. I was just Googling stuff, trying to figure this out. And there was this one paper that I found from some British person about the history of British amusement arcades. And I was like, they had a thing in the intro about how it was like a brief background, and most of it was about video arcades and amusement arcades. But there was a brief bit in the background, like in the intro, about, oh, well, you know, the arcades started in, they were really popular in England as a means of, what was it? Like, I think like seaside resorts would have arcades as for like a festival or fairs and things like that, fairgrounds. And then I was like, okay, let me look up British amusement arcades. And I started Googling around, and I Google stuff. And I saw something related to shopping. I was like, British arcade shopping. And it pops up. It pops up on the image results. And it was the, oh God, what was it? It's the one, I think, in London. I forget exactly what it's called. But it's the such and such shopping arcade. And I saw it. I saw the picture. It was from like 1920 something. And I remember, it's like, I had this eureka moment. I felt incredible. I knew the moment that I saw that picture that I had found the missing link in history. So that immediately, like, I start on a tear researching shopping arcades and where the shopping arcades came from. And then you get like the whole, like everything filled in, the way that shopping arcades started to get like, after the Industrial Revolution, you started to get like clockwork amusement machines and coin-op machines. And then eventually that kind of took over, and there were places there were actual arcades that just had amusement machines. And then eventually the architectural term gets divorced from the function of the place, or from its original meaning, and it gets tied to the function of the place. And that was like, I felt so good. I felt so good about that. That was a really, like, I felt elated when I had that moment. Around that time, I also had this really intense experience where we went and visited Golden Gate National Park, which is up in San Francisco. And usually I hate going to San Francisco. It's noisy and dirty and crowded, and I just don't like going there. But I think I might have been to Golden Gate one time when I was a little kid. I didn't really remember it very well. And man, going there again, it is absolutely, it's beautiful. If you ever visit San Francisco, I have to recommend, and you like parks or nature at all, I have to recommend going to Golden Gate. It was a typical San Francisco day, which means it was kind of foggy. And you might think that would make it like put a downer on it, but oh my God, like you don't even feel like you're in the middle of a city. It's just a massive, massive park. And I just remember, this feeling, and I realized that I love the wilderness, and I love nature. I was a Boy Scout, and I am an Eagle Scout. So I've for the longest time, I've always had a connection to nature and the outdoors, and a real appreciation for it, which I thank the scouting program very much for, because otherwise I'd be purely a homebody. But I I really got an appreciation for hiking and camping and the outdoors. And I realized that, man, I haven't actually been just in nature in a really long time. I haven't been out in a really long time. And just like it was like getting a hug after months of not feeling anyone else's touch. It was like hearing your name after like 6 months of silence. I realized how much I missed being in nature. It was a very spiritual experience for me. I remember looking up, and on this foggy, misty San Francisco day with very typical weather, looking up, and the treetops were just like as tall as a skyscraper. And I looked up and I saw them blowing in the wind, and I saw with the wind, the mist was blowing over the treetops. And I felt like I was feeling the same wind that was blowing that mist up there. And I realized I've got all these thoughts in my head because of this video about the environments that we're in, the spaces that we're in, and the spiritual meaning of being in a building and being in a place. One of the reasons, like one of the connections I drew with the arcades, was that the arcades were a way to, they were a gateway between the indoor and the outdoor. They were a way to they were an opening that created harmony between nature and the man-made structure. That these things could coexist in the same system. They weren't closed off. So I had all these ideas about being open and stuff, and just being there, and I felt like truly, like I walked down on the sidewalk, and there's all these buildings, and they all look different, and none of them are in harmony with each other, and they're all separated. Everything is separated by physical and abstract concepts, by the concrete and the walls and the fences and the sidewalk and property laws and ownership. And now I'm just standing here in this park, and there is no border between anything at all. All the trees are part of the soil, and I'm standing on the soil, and the grass is getting blown by the breeze, and the breeze is blowing the mist up there, and it's blowing through the trees, and everything is part of this completely interconnected system. And I was like, wow. It was this really spiritual experience for me. I really wanted to cry while I was there, but we were with one of our friends, and I didn't want to make it weird. But it was a really powerful experience to have all of that going through my head. Even talking about it now, I'm feeling very emotional. I might be a little sniffly now. It was a magnificent moment. And then Kat was like, "This is boring." Kat does not appreciate nature. She does not have a love for the outdoors. Yeah, but that's something that I really hold close to my heart from that experience, that I'll always think of when I think about that video. That's like part of it. It was also, I mean, the making of that video was very different. I mean, I'm not on camera at any points. There's no like gameplay to cut back to. It was really challenging to edit in an exciting way, because I was like, okay, this is sort of out of my wheelhouse. This is mostly really a video about history. And not even particularly gaming history. So I think in order to engage the audience, I have to be a little more on the ball with making every moment of this engaging and interesting. And also to be kind of tasteful about it, because if you've ever watched videos made for children on YouTube, maybe you've gotten a taste of like the key jingling, just like stimuli overload. And I pride myself that I feel like I have a little bit of taste, in the sense that I can that I can edit a video to be consistently engaging and have things that keep your attention without feeling like I'm like grabbing you by the head and like hijacking your like dopamine sensors or your fight or flight response. Because I've seen videos where it's too much. I'm like, this is too much. And I try never to go. I probably could. I've never tried because it's like gross to me. But yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. So it was like, how do I take just historical topics, and I don't have any fancy fucking Hank Green animations, or I can't cut to any experts giving testimony or stuff like that, like a History Channel documentary. How do I just take this stuff and present it in an interesting way? And that was really fun. It was actually really fun. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass. But a lot of times just an editing challenge like that is quite fun. Yeah, I think, that is like really probably one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. It's one of the most meaningful to myself. It was a very emotional process. I hope that answered your question. All right. Well, there was a lot of stuff that happened kind of recently. Those were all of the questions and the topics that I've been collecting for the last couple weeks. And now I kind of want to get onto, I'll trip over my words, a little bit of news. So I want to touch a little bit on old news, but I had some stuff to talk about, some stuff to say on it. Which was, you might have heard of it feels a little disrespectful to call it a kerfuffle, but the situation with 2XKO. The 2XKO situation is crazy. But actually, really, it is a shame. The 2XKO team had a bunch of layoffs less than 3 months after launch. And there's a lot of discussion about why that is and what happened. And first of all, I want to say it really sucks. I first found out about this because I follow one Pat the Flip on Blue Sky, and he had a very sad post to make about... he worked for Riot for 10 years, and he got laid off with 30 minutes notice. So to preface, I'm going to talk about why I think the layoffs happened, and for whatever I'm going to say, I want to preface by saying that does not excuse treating your employees like that. That's a really shitty way to treat people who have been so loyal to you, who've put in so much work for you. It's really ass, and I think that that's unacceptable from management to do that, to not even have a conversation beforehand preparing people for what's going to happen. And he was not the only one. About half of the staff was laid off. That's about 80 people. Which means it was a team of 160. And that includes other people such as, oh God. Marlin Pie was one of them. It's really weird to see these people being like announcing that they were laid off. Because especially like, I've talked about layoffs before on this show, but it's kind of weird now. Like, it feels like a weird case because, like I know Pat. I've met him. He hosts Cali Burst, which is a local fighting game tournament thing, like monthly tournament. I've been to Cali Burst. Pat has. I've never had like a real long conversation with him, but I've met him. He's commentated my games on stream. There's a photo of me after I won the Exerd Beginners Bracket tournament. First time I went, by the way. They took a photo of me in front of their mascot. And I'm pretty sure he took that photo. It's on my Blue Sky. I believe I reposted it. He took that photo. And seeing him announce that he got laid off was like, wow. It hit different. It was very sad. It was a real bummer, and it feels weird to I don't know, to just have that interaction. I've never known someone who then had like a very public layoff like that. And then as well, it's super interesting. I say interesting, a little harrowing to see all of these people from the fighting game community also get laid off. Many people found out about this news and they didn't know the background, but a lot of these people, like Pat's been in the Guilty Gear community for forever. He's basically kept competitive Exert alive for a big chunk of the at least North American scene. He was running Rev Tuesdays, which is an online tournament series, a weekly tournament series, long before Exert had rollback, and I guarantee you he would still be doing it if it never got rollback. Just incredibly passionate people who have been in the fighting game community, who have been contributing to the community for decades at this point. And seeing them get laid off really sucks. It really sucks ass. Apparently, some people got the opportunity to find jobs at other places in Riot. They also get, I think, a couple months of severance pay, which is like required by California law. So, okay, at the very least, they have a little grace period to get back on their feet. Would have been nice if they had a little time to actually do fucking job searching and not 30 minutes notice, but hey. So yeah, I hope that all these people can land on their feet and find jobs and find success elsewhere, because it's really sucks. It sucks the way that they were treated. Now, as to why the layoffs happened, I sort of get it. I kind of get it. It's unfortunately, I have to look at this as sort of a double-edged sword. I don't have any special insider knowledge as to what was going on, but we do know that 2XKO took 10 years to develop. That's a really long time for a very niche game. Even something with the Riot IP behind it, it's a really niche product. And I have to wonder just how much money was poured into 2XKO. And how many bad decisions seem to have been made. I'm going to speak a little bit as an audience member now and say that for a while, I was actually really hyped about the game. And then I kind of realized at some point it snuck up on me. I was just really sick of it. I think that the game's, the fact that it was so public for so long really did it a disservice in the long run. Because it gets announced, oh my god, there's a League of Legends fighting game. That's so cool. It goes quiet for a while. I think if they had come back and maybe there was a year of hype, whatever, before an actual release date, I think things would have been much different. But the fact that they came back and then said, we'll see you next year, and then next year we see the game, and it's very different, and then they're like, we'll see you next year, and then they did that 4 times or something. This is from my memory. And then they keep doing oh, well, there's gameplay footage. You can go play the game at EVO. Okay, well, most people aren't at EVO. Oh, there's an alpha test that you can get into. Okay, well, I didn't get into the alpha test. And then there's so much footage, and there's so much discussion around the game, and there's so many... It was so weird that the game had discourse. It had discourse around it about the combo length, and about this, and about that, and about... And it's it kind of frustrated me, because it's the game doesn't feel like it exists, but it's taking up a lot of air. It's taking up a lot of room in the fighting game discussion. And at a certain point, like, once you get further and further, and you're like, damn, there's only, like, what, like 6 characters in this game for a tag game? Like, what? I just got, I felt personally frustrated with the game. And I was like, I'm just sick of seeing it. I'm actually just, like, sick of seeing a game that is like vaporware. Like, it exists, but it doesn't exist. It's in some kind of superposition. And I think it really diminished the hype. Most people didn't even know the game came out. I don't even remember when it got an official release because, like, it came out of beta because it was in beta for so long. And then they were like, oh, it'll be out of beta when we have 10 characters. And it was like, when is the game out? Is it playable? Do you still need an invite? I don't know. It just sort of like didn't exist. It existed in that superposition for so long that when it finally did actually exist and you can go play it, I don't think like I think any hype was kind of over. I think it was kind of dead. There are other factors to it that people have talked about. The fact that it is a 2v2 active tag fighter. I don't actually know how meaningful that was in turning people off of the game. I think that the bigger problem was how many people even knew about the game in the first place. You might say that the fact that it was so niche and it had kind of a niche appeal limited the word of mouth that it could spread. I think that's a possibility. There's also like there's just so many like there's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of like mismanagement that I don't know, I see from the outside. For one, who the fuck picked that name? What a terrible name for anything. What a like it doesn't even sound like a Riot game. It doesn't sound like a League of Legends game. It's just like, I don't know. The name is like Yahtzee, you know. It's like why did you name it after the KO? It's like if I name my game KO. The game's literally 2x KO. Super weird. Not catchy. It doesn't read well. It doesn't fit into your brain well. It feels jagged and weird when I think about it. So, like, marketing isn't good. It looked really nice. I don't think that the game should have been rebooted, like, 3 times. That seems like actually, like, a big problem. I feel like Riot is just generally really bad at coordinating stuff. As someone who played League of Legends for a very long time, Riot has never been good at actually getting their shit together and having the managerial skills to get projects finished in a cohesive way, especially with each other. Like, they should have had an MMO out like 5 years ago, you know? I don't think that MMO's ever going to happen. There's probably a bunch of wasted effort now on this project that will never come to fruition. I highly doubt it. And why? I don't know. They seem extremely lax, like almost a little too lax with what they allow. Like, who let the game be in development? Who let a free-to-play fighting game be in development for 10 years? I feel like at some point someone should have come in and just put their foot down and said, this is the vision that you guys need to commit to. Like, whatever you're on right now. Because it's been too long. And I kind of see that as being one of the contributing factors to the layoffs. So there's 2 things. Number one, in 2024, Riot did a bunch of layoffs, which they love doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if the 2XKO team layoffs were going to be a part of those, but the game was in too critical of a state to justify doing that to the team. It would have been too disruptive to the game to get it out in a proper state. I think that's one possibility. There's also the possibility that they had their, because I mean, the layoffs happened so fast after the game's release. Like, it's not even a full financial quarter. And I have to wonder if I assume that they had their finger on that's what makes me think they had their finger on the trigger before the game even came out. Because there was no period of like, well, let's just see how the game does and then we'll go from there. Because some amount of layoffs are unfortunately common in a lot of live service games. Because it takes so many people to get the game made, but after that, not as many people are required to keep the game going. So, that could have to do with the costs of the game. I'm not sure what Riot prioritizes, or if the budget and whether it can make its money back is an actual contributing factor, if it's a significant factor to them pulling the plug on a bunch of workers. Or it could just be, again, an extension of their typical layoff patterns. Either way, I think that a lot of things kind of went in the wrong way on 2XKO. And personally, I haven't even installed the game because it uses fucking Vanguard, and I'm just not going to install something with a kernel level anti-cheat on my machine. I think I said this, I was going to do High Guard. I was going to actually play High Guard, and then I chose not to. Wow, there's some weird High Guard news coming out recently. So, it sucks what happened to 2XKO. You know what else sucks? It's really weird to see, I think it was Tom Cannon, have to make a social media post where he's justifying layoffs due to like sales momentum. That's like a really weird, disheartening thing to see happen. I think about like how many things he's built that this has happened to now. Like Evo, with all that Saudi shit. Truly, it capital corrupts absolutely. Truly. So that was the 2XKO news. I want to talk about just touch on that a little bit to give a little bit of perspective on that. It could have been the budget. It could have been the development time. There's many possibilities for why. I think it's a fucking terrible idea, can I say this, to lay off one of your lead game designers 3 months after the game came out. That's what Pat Miller, that's what Pat the Flip was. He was a lead gameplay designer and producer. It just feels like, is there a plan here? In a game that is already infamously lacking in characters for its genre? Tokon is going to launch with 20 characters. Which is acceptable. That's an acceptable roster. It's probably a little small in a 4v4 game. You're asking for a lot of characters in a 4v4 game. I'll be honest. You're setting yourself up for a difficult road. But it's still 10 more than 2XKO launched. Yeah, and there's I don't know, there's a bunch of other little gripes that people have. The amount of arcane representation. It is so weird to me, as someone who's actually somewhat versed in League of Legends lore, that Arcane is now like a mandatory inclusion in any League of Legends properties, like spin-offs and stuff. Because Zaun and Piltover are actually really minor in the lore, like in the grand scheme of things. They're kind of like a minor little side story to flesh the world out, to give it like a little thing going on over here. The big stuff is like Demacia, Noxus, Shurima, Freljord, Ionia a little bit, but like those are the really like lore important regions. I think they just picked Piltover and Zaun for Arcane because it worked well for like a beginner story to get you into the world, because it's literally a very small part of the world that's not that important in the grand scheme of things. There's not a lot of big movers and shakers in those regions. Yeah, I don't know. That was weird. Okay, now for some very funny news. So Phil Spencer is out. He's out. He's retiring from Xbox. Let's all give a hand to Phil. Phil Spencer. I think that Spencer was someone who really took some time to build up all the ill will towards him. And I feel a little bad for the guy. Phil Spencer clearly is someone... Okay, you know what how I was last time? I think I was talking about Jeff Keighley as someone who seems genuinely passionate about video games, but just has very questionable taste. I think that Phil Spencer could go in the same boat, but he's actually responsible for like a lot of people's jobs. Well, Jeff is as well, but bro, way more on Spencer's end. So, when I think of like the legacy of Phil Spencer, I think of an absolute kind of the true flounder. I think of the true flounder. You can easily pinpoint the fall of the Xbox brand to it begins with Don Matrick. Actually, people don't usually talk about this as much. It was actually the Kinect. The Kinect actually fucked Microsoft up because it like sidetracked them for years. Oh my god. Was the Kinect under Matrick? Hang on, I have to look this up. Xbox. Don Matrick Xbox. I have to double check this. Oh. Oh wait, that was actually all him. Oh no, he was the Kinect. Known for oh my god. Oh wow, it really was all him. I forgot. Don Matrick fucking developed the Kinect. Oh, it really all goes to him. Shit. Damn. So, Microsoft, when you look at like the downfall of the Xbox brand, you really have to start with the Kinect. Like the Kinect came out at a time when people were like, oh boy, let's copy Nintendo's Wii. The motion controls are the next thing. And hey, you know what? It was a gimmicky thing. But, like the PlayStation Move, it could be cool as a little side thing. A little side peripheral. And Xbox went all in. They went all in on the Kinect, much to their detriment. They made it a huge part of their brand. They eventually forced it on a lot of people. They had all this integration. Like, to their credit, they did try to integrate the peripheral into the console. But a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people, the reception to it was always mixed. Some people are like, I love my Kinect. And other people hated that thing. If you look at the games that came out for Kinect, which there weren't that many, it actually sidelined not just like the Xbox brand, but a lot of their second party studios as well. Like, think about like Rare and Lionhead. Yeah, Lionhead. Banjo-Kazooie is like a real Banjo-Kazooie and Conker and the stuff that Rare owns. Those could have been actual like draws, but they just made one Banjo-Kazooie game and then they sent them off to the Connect mines for several years. Lionhead, hang on, I'll look at Lionhead games. What do they work on in that time? Okay. Oh, a bunch of stuff that got canceled. Cool. Oh my god, I forgot they did the Project Milo thing. Yeah, which was actually just a fake tech demo. It was just a complete lie of a tech demo. You had these multiple second party studios that had close connections to Microsoft. That basically just got sidetracked and made nothing that was really interesting or attention grabbing. Just like kind of gimmicky side projects that did not appeal to the core Xbox audience of hardcore gamers. Like it was basically just a lot of fluff. Then, not to mention the Xbox One's launch, of course. I mean, this has been talked about to death, but if you think about the Kinect, it was forced upon Xbox One owners and increased the price by like $100. Jesus. Matrick was out pretty shortly after the One launched, and Spencer came in to replace him. Now, a lot of the blame lies on Matrick, and he certainly fucked the company up quite a bit in their public image, and he lost an immense amount of consumer trust. But I think you really do have to give something to Phil Spencer for not necessarily being like super hostile to the community, but at the very least for being a really bad manager. When I think of Spencer's time at Xbox, I think of a lot of stuff just not getting done or total misfires. This really starts with, like, I think the core of this is how they treated Halo, which has now depreciated in value so much that they're willing to put it onto PlayStation consoles, which when that happened, I just said this is like the moment it's actually over. Xbox as a brand doesn't exist anymore. Giving control to 343 was such a mistake. 343 was so poorly conceived, so poorly organized, and had no idea what they were doing. But they all spoke, maybe that was it, they all spoke very confidently in like promotional videos and stuff. But it's clear that like there's no clear vision for Halo at the company. They make all these Halo games that no one likes. And now the series is basically like kind of in the dumpster. I know some people like Infinite, but you can't claim that it's like a particularly big game. It's like, oh, if you own an Xbox, you could play it. Now compare this to Sony, which during the Xbox One's lifespan, Sony had so many heavy hitters in terms of their exclusives. And there's a lot to criticize Sony for. They focused, I think, a little bit too much on the big blockbuster games with really long dev times. And neglected a lot of those more interesting, more artsy titles that they used to put out with the Studio Japan that rounded out the library and gave something to people who wanted something a little more alternative. Certainly they neglected that part of their audience. But, I mean, everyone I've met who played the Horizon games likes the Horizon games. People love those God of War games. People love those, well, not everyone loves those Last of Us games. But hey, they spun it into a successful TV show. Sony, they had the Spider-Man games. Sony's had a fair amount of like hits of actual system seller titles. How many of those has Xbox had? How many? There's been no, like, was there a Gears of War game? I don't even remember when the last Gears came out. Was it 5? When did that come out? That was like, I don't know, these very ephemeral titles. There hasn't been a reason to get excited about the Xbox library, about owning an Xbox, in years. I have not felt the temptation to go to Xbox, like, ever. All they really had, and this really is Spencer's biggest legacy, is Game Pass, which unfortunately proved to be unsustainable in the long run. Perhaps if they had used Game Pass as a means to kind of smooth things over until they got an actual, or like a strong first and second party lineup together, and offered Game Pass as a side thing, kind of like how Sony treats PlayStation Plus. That could have been one thing, but it just never came together. It never came together. And it's kind of a shame to see them go out like this. It's kind of a shame to see them go out like this. And I look over to the other side, and I look at PlayStation, who has also been fumbling the ball. Think about how much wasted time. It feels like the last 10 years of the console industry has been basically wasted by everyone except for Nintendo. Because PlayStation just closed BluePoint, which it seems like a terrible idea. I don't know why. It can't have been that dire internally, right? They haven't even had like a failure yet. Apparently, the reason they closed it was just because of a failure to get a successful pitch off the ground. I feel like at that point, shouldn't PlayStation just give them an assignment? Like, just give them a job. Of course, everyone's wondering, why didn't you do Bloodborne? At this point, I feel like there's some kind of a curse on Bloodborne. And they if they do, like an earthquake is going to happen and kill a bunch of people. Someone got like their fortune told, and they said, if you make a Bloodborne remake, everyone in the world is going to die. So they're like, okay, Bloodborne's going to be real. It's going to open a portal to Yharnam. And then you look at like, okay, what was BluePoint doing before? Oh, Sony had them working on a live service God of War game. Jesus Christ. A game that truly you could not pitch if you actually liked video games. That's something that you make when you're into, like, when you have a business degree and you aren't really like a gamer. A game that has no true audience. It just sounds nice. It sounds theoretically good if you know nothing about the audience. Well, God of War is popular. People like our God of War games. And live services can make so much money. Let's put them together as part of our 1 million live service initiative. We're going to have so many, guys. And then, oh my god, guess what? Concord. I think Concord was this massive wake-up call. And it might be one of the reasons that they're canceling. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why they're canceling a bunch of these projects. Like, how much fucking wasted time and money and effort has there been on these just terrible projects? On these things that have no audience, that are going to exist for 2 months. In Concord's case, 2 weeks, about 15 days. That then close and don't really add anyone to anyone's life. Don't add anything to anyone's lives. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. The only real bastion of like where good games are gonna, like, the best of gaming right now is coming from small teams, coming from like mid-budget studios. Nintendo still does make good games. The PC market is still very vibrant. And other than that, like, the big console players have just been failing. Just absolutely failing for the last 10 years. And it's really a bummer to see. Not because I'm like going to bat and I want the billion-dollar corporation to succeed. I just want good games to come out. The billion-dollar corporation can succeed, and they can make good games. They can make good games as well, and a variety of interesting, diverse experiences. I don't know why they have to like make their balance sheets look good. There's better ways to make your balance sheet look good than laying people off. Good God. And that's another thing Phil Spencer just loved doing. I can't say he loved doing it. That's a little harsh of me. But he did lay a bunch of people off after talking about how the Xbox brand was a family. Yeah, kind of someone, I feel like, let's say a victim of his own incompetence. Was he working with, was he the one who was trying to get Scalebound made? Another big failure, another big flop? That was also partially due to Platinum having a lot of very incompetent people working there. But, oh my God, just a legacy of failure. Spencer's real legacy as the head of Xbox is really completely failing to turn the ship around, especially in the long run. I cannot say he left them in a better position than he found them in, because I really don't know what Xbox even has going for it at this point. It's quite dire. They've got a new person in. Her name is Asha Sharma. I think she's just worked at Xbox for a while. She made a bunch of tweets to be like, hey, gamers. I will reserve my judgment until she actually says something, or until we actually see the fruits of her management, which won't be for a while. That's a thing with big management changes, especially in the games industry, is that you will not see the long-term. They're all long-term effects. Anything that she tries to put into motion, we won't even see for probably like at least 3 years. So, yeah. Thanks, Phil. Good luck, Asha. And now I want to talk about some stuff that I watched and played. So, I can't believe I never got the chance to talk about Return of the King. I want to at least wrap up the my discussion of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, because I did see The Return of the King at the end of the week, that big long week where we watched all of them in theaters. And I think looking back and listening back to what I said about the first two films, honestly, I don't have that much to say about Return of the King, besides the fact that it does go hard. It is a good-ass movie. At the end of the Lord of the Rings films, I feel like I've had a delicious, full Thanksgiving feast. I am extremely satisfied. I got a big-ass story with a lot going on that warranted the runtime. And I feel extremely satisfied with where everything ended up. So for some... And I also think that I was fairly spot on with how I kind of pictured the story going. The themes were pretty obvious by the end of The Two Towers, and I could basically tell where most of the characters were headed, and I was excited to see them go there. And yeah, it kicked ass. I really enjoy. I just liked everything. It's difficult to say which of the three is my favorite, because when Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, The Lord of the Rings is actually just one book. I realize it's actually been sitting in that big pile of books I have in my room because I don't have enough shelf space to keep all the books I own. I realize I just have a complete copy of The Lord of the Rings, and it's like as big as the Bible, because it's a big-ass book. And it was just written to be a single book. I also realized this. Every book of The Lord of the Rings is actually 2 books itself. They're all split up into 2. It's more like 6 novels that constitute one big story that he had to release over the course of several years in the form of three volumes. So separating them out, like they don't make a very clear, there's not a very clear, like, I don't know. It's not easy to separate them as sequels or prequels to each other because they all really are just one story. And I can't say that I necessarily liked one part of it better than the other because it's just an escalation of the same story. The Fellowship of the Ring is a great introduction to the world and the characters. The 2 towers massively, it pulls the view back. You get a lot of Middle-earth politics, which now feels really interesting because I'm invested in the characters. Like, I really wouldn't give a fuck about Gondor and Rohan and all that if I didn't already think Aragorn was the coolest motherfucker alive. But because he is, I'm now invested in this whole storyline. And then Return of the King is like this great epic payoff to all of these things, that all these plot lines that have been building up. There's all the stuff with Aragorn kind of embracing his role as the king, his relationship with Arwen, the kind of political storyline of Gondor, and I was so stoked that my man Faramir got to hook up with Éowyn in the end. Because I was like, Éowyn's cool, but I don't want her to end up with Aragorn. Like, I know it's just a little side thing until he actually eventually gets back to Arwen. But I liked Éowyn. I didn't want her to get, like pussy blocked. And I ended up really liking Faramir. I think he actually ended up being one of my favorite characters. I thought that I liked how his introduction is, he's just kind of an asshole. You know, he's just like, he's very antagonistic towards the main characters for understandable reasons. You get why. And once you kind of see his relationship with his father and his dead brother and how he's felt like he's always been the lesser son, I find that kind of character really compelling because it gives them like a complex that's very understandable. That's someone that they're trying to live up to this ideal that their families put out for them. And I really enjoy, like, dude, his dad is such an asshole. He's basically lost his mind. All that stuff between him and, like, seeing the ghost of Boromir and stuff. Oh my god, the fucking scene where Faramir, I think it's when his dad, I forget what his dad's name is. It's not Theoden. Is it Theoden? No. That's the king of Rohan. But his dad basically orders him on a suicide mission. And Faramir is like, you wish that I had died instead of Boromir, don't you? And his dad is like, yeah. It's not even difficult for him to say. He's not even uncomfortable. He's just like, yeah, duh. And the actor his response is so good. His performance is so good because you cut back to him and he doesn't look shocked because he basically expected that. He knows in his heart that his dad wishes he had died instead. You know, God took the wrong son and all that. But hearing it from the man himself, it just kind of drives the knife deeper. He doesn't get surprised, he just gets more sad. just slightly more sad about the whole thing than he already was. And he's like, fuck it. We'll ride into battle. Yeah, I like that whole, I don't know, I like that whole thing that he was more of like the thoughtful kind of academic of the siblings, and he never lived up to this like martial ideal that his dad had that Boromir fulfilled. And you totally get where he's coming from when he does want the ring initially, like in the Two Towers. You get where he's coming from, like, this is his chance. This is his opportunity to finally prove to his dad that he's valuable, that he can secure the One Ring. And then he realizes this is the difference between him and Boromir, right? Like, he and Boromir both are tempted to take the ring for Gondor. But this is almost more ironic. Boromir definitely, like, he sees the big picture in a sense. He feels compelled to take it, to use it as a weapon for Gondor. But that ultimately blinds him because he's like, because of who he is, because he was all the qualities that made him the favored son. He focuses too much on all that stuff. Whereas Faramir has a little bit more presence of mind, and there's a little bit more of there's a little more thoughtfulness to him. So even though he is initially tempted to take it, once he really understands what the ring does, what it does to people, and like he gets to see Gollum and all that, and he gets to see Frodo in his like gradually more fucked up state. He has a moment where he actually, his better judgment takes over, and he's like, oh my God. And I think especially when they tell him that Boromir died because he coveted the ring. That's what got Boromir killed. Because it made him basically lose himself, and then they got ambushed. That's what kind of snaps him back to reality. And he realizes that he can't follow in his brother's footsteps. And him not following in his brother's footsteps is kind of what keeps him. Every time Faramir chooses not to be like Boromir, it like works. It works or would have worked out better for him. That was actually his strength. That being who he was actually the better option in all scenarios, and not trying to live up to someone he wasn't. I thought he was just super cool. I'm glad he got a little bit of like a payoff, because I liked Eowyn. I thought she was cool. It was neat that she got to actually fight in a battle by the end. And yeah, that was all neat. I liked that. And that's just like one side character. Like, the way that I've described this is just like a minor side character, a relatively minor character in this whole story. The stuff between Frodo and Gollum and Sam is great. Man, like, I really feel like I have been lied to about Tolkien my entire life. A lot of times I've always heard Tolkien described as his characters are very black and white in their morality. That's true in some sense. It's true that I think it's because Tolkien had very strong ideas about what is good and what is evil, and that is reflected in his work as much as he wanted it not to be. It is inevitable that his own philosophy is going to show itself in The Lord of the Rings. And so, because he's writing a myth, it's kind of necessary for characters to fulfill like archetypes, these mythic archetypes. And when you look at Frodo, Frodo has this interesting archetype from myth, which is the person who's tempted, someone who's tempted to do things. You see this in tons of like epic stories across time. The person who is tempted, especially by power. And Frodo's a wonderful encapsulation of that, as someone who goes through a struggle. In truth, like, no one else but Frodo could have taken the ring. It's the fact that he kind of doesn't want to do it that makes him perfect to be the ring bearer. But even then, it still finds its way to corrupt him. It finds its way to like worm itself into his heart. There's also this really interesting thing I ended up watching. Okay, side tangent. When I say I feel like I've been lied to about Tolkien my whole life, I realize that I think that nerds they can do a huge disservice to the things that they love. There's a lot of nerds who are into things because the way I put it is they want textbooks instead of stories. They like The Lord of the Rings enough as a story, but what they really want is a bunch of dates and factoids. And hey, that stuff can be cool. It's cool that Tolkien put out this whole history and stuff of Middle-earth, and that he wrote all that and he put that level of thought into it. But personally, I am willing to engage with those things to the degree that they give me a greater understanding of the story. I found that, like, when I started watching these movies, I was not into learning about any of the deeper lore. But I watch a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, and that kind of leads me to like Tolkien YouTube stuff. And hey, there's some background info about stuff Tolkien wrote about in the Silmarillion or all the expanded stuff or his short stories and things. And I think that's actually really interesting. And that kind of expands my appreciation for the story. And I'm glad that, like, within Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, you never really learn what Gandalf actually is. Like, I don't know if this is a spoiler or it kind of dampens the fun a little bit, but Gandalf's like a fucking spirit incarnated on Earth by, like, the benevolent god. That's what Gandalf and all the wizards actually are. They are not actual human beings. They're not even human beings who ascended to something. They are incarnated, like, almost angels. You never even get a hint of that, which I think shows a wonderful level of restraint on Tolkien's part to just let Gandalf be kind of mysterious and mystical. And when he comes back, it's like, you could... Tolkien was writing to be intending for the Lord of the Rings to be like a pre-Christian myth. So I think it would be a little easy to say that he's like a Jesus figure. Because, he came back to life. But it's almost like he's almost his own kind of mythic archetype in that sense. He's this wandering, wise wizard who is a mentor and a guide who dies and then comes back to again serve as a leader. And that's almost like its own thing. What was I talking about? Right, so like, when I'd say that I think that they do kind of a disservice, The Lord of the Rings has all this fascinating thematic content and really great characters. But I feel like, for my whole life, my exposure to Tolkien has, to people talking about Tolkien especially, has been... Oh God, is my throat dry or something? Has been people going, actually, Gandalf is a battle mage. And it's just like shit like that, which, okay, sure. Fine. But I can't believe that for how influential J.R.R. Tolkien is, that, that I have never heard people talk about, like, the really interesting themes and character moments and stuff. Like, okay, one of the things I find really interesting, and I got this off of a YouTube video, because it's a little detail that's in the book, and it's kind of it's in the movie, but it's not, I sound like, in the movie you make go flipper. It's in the movie, but it's kind of spread across. It's kind of spread out, and it's opposed to being a single scene. There's a scene in The Return of the King, the book, when they are climbing they're climbing up out of wherever, like, the sort of underground caverns are. And it's that whole sequence where Gollum and Sam and Frodo are climbing. And Gollum wakes up and he's going back and forth between Gollum and Smeagol and who's really in control. And there's hair in my mouth. Who's really in control and what his intentions are. He's leading them into the trap to Shelob's lair. And in the book, there's this moment where Gollum wakes up and he sees Sam and Frodo asleep. And for a moment, all this darkness in his heart, all the clouds of darkness just kind of pass away. And that Smeagol, that Smeagol persona of who he was before he was corrupted by the ring, it all kind of crystallizes for a second, and he realizes that even in his like decrepit, corrupted state, that goodness inside of him wins over for a moment. And he has this doubt where he's like, maybe I shouldn't lead them into a trap. Maybe they do have good intentions. Maybe I should be helping them. Maybe I do want to be maybe it would be good to do that. Maybe I want to be a good person. And then Sam rouses from his sleep and he sees Gollum watching them. And he makes some like dismissive comment. He says like, "What are you doing, you shifty, smelly piece of shit?" And in that instant, Smeagol is snuffed out. Smeagol basically dies. And the Gollum persona is all that's left. Whatever goodness he could have had in him is gone. It in this critical moment, it has been blasted away by Sam. And this results in absolute catastrophe, leading them to Shelob's lair, fucking attacking Frodo. I mean, sort of like it kind of technically saves them, because it's how the ring gets destroyed, is Gollum stealing the ring when Frodo is completely unable to give it up. But in the moment, I mean, he basically ruined whatever good of a person Smeagol could have been. And what's interesting about that, I think there's a letter from Tolkien where I think Tolkien, he said at one point that like Sam was the true hero of the story, which I think is true in many ways. But he has this really interesting letter where he says that Sam's greatest virtue is also his greatest flaw. And it's his loyalty, and it's his love for Frodo. He absolutely loves Frodo. Like, I don't know if this was intended by Tolkien. There is like a homoerotic undercurrent between their relationship. It feels like a little more than a friendship at certain points. And I don't say that jokingly. I mean, like, genuinely, I wanted them to kiss. He loves Frodo. And he is right to doubt Gollum's intentions. Like, Gollum was planning to betray them. But at the same time, his loyalty to Frodo engendered a kind of complete dismissal of Gollum, that Frodo never had. Gandalf told him earlier in the story that Bilbo sparing Gollum's life and taking pity on him may have been one of the most important things he ever did. And that was actually true. The fact that Gollum survived all the way to the end of The Lord of the Rings was critical to good triumphing over evil. And so Frodo, there's also the fact that Frodo sees himself in Gollum as like like another kind of addict to the ring. But Sam, who is, I'll say, more pure, he doesn't feel like the temptation of the ring, at least not that we see, and who is, he's more pure And he's extremely loyal to his master Frodo. He also calls him master all the time, which is crazy. But it also it there's like a really interesting nuance to it, because that love creates cruelty for Gollum, towards Gollum, I should say. And like, what a fucking interesting character. What an interesting thing to write, right? Especially for someone who you consider to be the one of the primary heroes of the story. So cool. Such a good moment. Such an interesting character. I think the way that the ring is destroyed is quite interesting as well. That in the end, Frodo could not overcome the ring. Even him, like the most good-hearted, the one who didn't even want it in the first place, who wanted to be rid of it, couldn't destroy the ring. Like, I don't know if Sam would have been able to destroy the ring. Frodo probably would have attacked him if he tried to even take the ring. But Gollum is like this person who was driven into total, almost misanthropy, I guess. Is that how you pronounce it? By his addiction, a distrust of people, of Frodo and Sam's intent, and the fact that he wins over. And his addiction is ultimately what drives. It's a very odd. It's like I really had to have to think about it for a while. The choice to make good triumphing over evil is accomplished by the addiction winning out and destroying the addict. It's a very odd ending, right? Because I think it's unfair to call Gollum entirely evil. He's intentionally a very dualistic character. And the fact that he won out, the fact that his worse side won out, is actually what saved the day, is a really interesting choice. It's very odd, and I don't know exactly how I feel about it. It's a really intense climax. But yeah, it's, man, what a fucking, you could talk about this shit forever. You could talk about this forever. I also realized when we walked into the theater, all three showings, all three movies, they got Peter Jackson to record some vlogs in his house where he's just kind of rambling about nothing and telling some like stories, and he clearly needs like notes. He's just kind of rambling about stuff in the theater, and or like in his house with like his cat pole in the background. His cats are running around. But I realized that these are actually all the extended editions, which makes sense. If you're going to the 25th anniversary, you want the full fat version of these movies. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's probably the best way to watch them. It does add like 30 minutes to every single movie and makes Return of the King over 4 hours. But I have to recommend it, and especially Return of the King. I can't believe that they cut out Saruman's death from Return of the King. That was apparently a scene that happened. It was going to be at the end of the Two Towers. And they cut it out because it's very long and it comes after the real climax of the Two Towers. And I see why they cut it. It would have been weird pacing wise. It's just a lot. It's a big scene to toss in at the end. But, and then it was going to be at the beginning of Return of the King. And then they were like, it's already a long movie. Let's just cut it out. And I think that that's fucked up. I feel like nowadays maybe they would have kept it in. Because that's such a good scene. Saruman at the top of the tower, defeated but still like confident and just megalomaniacal, and Grima stabbing him in the back. It's great. I can't believe that they cut that shit. It's such a good scene. And Christopher Lee was apparently pissed that they cut it out, which I get, because it's a classic. It's a great scene. His performance as Saruman is A+. And also, it's really weird that Saruman just disappears from the rest of the movie. This is something that apparently people wondered back in the day. It's a really weird cut because you're like, he's one of the most important people in the whole series. He's one of the driving villains of the whole plot. And he just dies off screen and is not even mentioned in the theatrical cut? How bizarre. How bizarre. How bizarre. Yeah, there's just, oh my god, there's so much good stuff. I love the scene of Gandalf talking to, I always mix up if it's Merry or Pippin, but talking to one of them about what it was like to die and his kind of vision of the eternal shores and all that. Like, what a beautiful, beautiful moment. There's a lot of themes of death and endings and moving on in this movie. And it feels like it really ties the whole thing together. First of all, the movie has like 10 endings. It spends a lot of time. Like, that epilogue is good, but it is really long. It's like 20 minutes of wrapping up plot lines, and it keeps going and going, and then there's a time skip. But it's great. It's great. I'm going to kind of cut myself short because there is just so much to talk about with Return of the King and the whole trilogy that I don't want to get too bogged down. And eventually I do want this episode to end itself. But yeah, they're fantastic. The extended editions are great. And yeah, I'm really glad that I got to see these. I'm really glad I got to see them in theaters. This was a great experience. And I'm now like much more interested in the whole Lord of the Rings like universe and stuff. I think that shit's cool now. So now I'm going to move on to a movie that is significantly less impressive. It's called Oliver and Company. This was, I think Kat told me it was the last Disney animated film that they did before The Little Mermaid. And it definitely feels like it. It definitely feels like this is the last movie they did when they were in their, like, what do we do kind of phase. Before they had their big Renaissance period in the 90s. So Oliver and Company is like an adaptation of Oliver Twist. And I'm only going to talk about it because it's more interesting to talk about in like a meta sense. Because the movie is extremely uninteresting. I would be shocked to learn that this is anyone's favorite movie. Like, maybe if you've only seen Oliver and Company. But other than that, there's just, like, not a lot to it. It's really hard to describe. But it's just, like, when I was done watching it, I didn't feel like I'd wasted my time. I just felt like I had watched a movie. I finished, it was over and the credits rolled, and I said, I definitely feel like I just watched a movie. It had a plot and a conflict and characters, and it moved. And it did stuff, and they did stuff, and it had themes, I guess. And it was a story. And then it was over. It's about like it's like Oliver Twist, but it's like a cat. And he, I guess he's not even at an orphanage. He's at like he's on the street, and he meets this dog. Oh my god, Billy Joel. The dog is played by Billy Joel. And there's only like 3 songs in the movie. It's like kind of a musical. One of them is performed by Billy Joel. Which also maybe hurt my enjoyment because I am not a big Billy Joel fan. I don't know if I've ever heard a Billy Joel song that I liked, and I've heard many that I strongly dislike. I am really not a fan of his. And it's not like these are original Billy Joel songs. It's just like I don't really like him that much. No, I don't like Piano Man. I actually really don't like Piano Man. I'm sorry, his writing is not this fire. If the most interesting thing about the movie is actually just watching the techniques that they use, not because it looks especially good, but because this was okay, so the movie that directly preceded this was The Great Mouse Detective, which I actually liked. I liked The Great Mouse Detective. Now, the climax of that film was the first time that Disney really used a lot of CG compositing in their animation. It's this big action set piece on a clock tower, and they're grappling around on the hands of the clock and the gears and stuff, and it was a lot easier to animate with CG. It's composited really well. It's worked into the animation really well, so it's not super glaring or distracting when you're in the clockwork and all that. The clockworks. And I thought it was done pretty well. It was pretty seamless. And then that was like the main scene that it was used in. They might have used it for a few other things in that movie. But in Oliver and Company, they fucking love that. Dude, there is so much. Anything that moves that isn't a character is CG in this movie. Like every vehicle, and there's a lot of vehicles because it takes place in New York. Like every vehicle, there's like a scene where they're walking across some vents. You know how New York has those big vent grates on the street corners, or on the sidewalks or the streets? I don't know much. It's like on the curb. Yeah, they're walking over one of those, and they're like, fuck it, I'm not animating the perspective on that. Do it CG. Do it in CG. It's just everywhere. There's so much CG in this movie. It's crazy. They were like, I'm not animating that shit. And it's really obvious when you're looking at it, because it looks like flat, untextured polygons that are just solid colors. It's very distracting. And the most entertaining part of the movie was just noticing all the little places where they used CG so they wouldn't have to animate something. And yeah, it makes the movie... it struck me, and I was like, wow, this looks budget. Just like something about the character designs and the way that they moved. That was the first few shots where things were actually moving. That was what I thought, wow, this looks like a budget movie. It's something that came out that probably entertained some kids for 70 minutes. It's not long either. Man, I just remember we were at this point where we were watching it, and I was like, there's only like 10 minutes left in the movie. Is it gonna end? And then it did, and I went, oh yeah, I guess it did move to a conclusion. Yeah, not terribly. Not okay. Whoa. Okay, this just hit me. The day after we watched Oliver and Company, we went to this cosplay meetup thing at a park, and I swear to God, hand on my heart, hand on the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, and the Doom Bible, there was a guy at the cosplay meetup who was dressed as the fucking Billy Joel dog from Oliver and Company. And we looked at each other and we went, is he the Billy Joel dog from Oliver and Company? What the hell? And he was walking around with a speaker playing nothing but Billy Joel music, to my chagrin. It was fucking weird. And we mentioned it, and one of that guy's friends came up, and he was like, did you guys say Oliver and Company? And we were like, yeah. And he was like, dude, I fucking love Oliver and Company. Hell yeah. And like I think that I met like a was that guy like an alien? Was that guy like an alien? Was this or were we side characters in a TV show about an alien trying to integrate into society? Like an episode of Invader Zim? Where Zim is like, what do the humans like? Billy Joel! um yeah. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that. So oh, we watched Toy Story 3 and 4. These were also movies that she showed me. Because Toy Story 5 comes out later this year, I think. And I guess she wants to see it. And so I have seen my background. I think I talked about Toy Story because we went to go see it when it got rescreened for an anniversary thing. And that was fun. Toy Story is a good movie. It's a good family movie. It's a lot more well thought out than I remember it being as a kid. I think I was just able to notice a lot of little details the second time around, or definitely not the second time around, but seeing it as an adult. Toy Story and The Lion King were the go-to movies for when I was in school for having a movie day. That was like, what are we going to watch? Toy Story or The Lion King? So I have seen them many times. And honestly, just like with The Lion King, seeing it with the eyes of an adult definitely helped me appreciate it more. I've seen one many times. I had seen the second movie a few times. I think only really once on television in its entirety when I was a kid, and my memory of it is not nearly as good, but we did watch it I think after we saw that for the first movie in theaters. And I watched Toy Story 3 like I think 2 or 3 years after it came out. I didn't see it in theaters. I watched it with my family. I think we got it on Redbox. And I remember at the time, I think I was in like middle school. I think I was like maybe 11. And I remember watching it at the time and feeling like a little embarrassed. I remember feeling like I'm a little too old for this. Well, now I can rewatch it with the company of my girlfriend, who only watches baby movies. I'm joking. Her Letterboxd is fucked up. It's actually fucked up. But you know, just watching it as an adult in a more like I don't know, objective way, where my perception isn't being quite as colored as it was as like a middle schooler who was like, I'm too cool for this stuff. Toy Story 3 is fine. Apparently this is a very controversial statement. I realized the next day that I don't have very interesting opinions on video games. Like, I don't have a lot of, like, I couldn't really do, like, here's my hot takes on gaming. There's a couple, I don't know, I like System Shock 1 more than 2. But, like, that's very different from, like, music hot takes, you know? I feel like that's really, like, no one gives a fuck. This is a whole, oh my god, this is like a whole side topic. Video games have this really interesting cultural thing going on that separates them. There's a different culture in discussion about games. Because I think at one point I saw someone say something like, yeah, there's no real, like, letterboxd for video games. And I was like, there is, actually. It's called backlogged. It's spelled, you know how letterbox just takes the E off of the ED at the end? Backlogged is the same thing. And it is basically a site that is, it might even be run by the same company as Letterboxd, because it's basically the same format just for video games. And no one uses it. I have never heard anyone talk about it. Why is that? And ultimately, I could go along like a whole history lesson about like the anthropological evolution of the gaming audience. But really, I can boil it down to this. No one has ever gotten pussy for knowing what mule is. And trust me, I've tried. When I was, before I met Kat, when I was on Tinder, one of my go-to lines, so one of the reasons Tinder sucks when you're a guy is that you are expected to make the first move every single fucking time. Women will never engage with you. They just go, perform for my amusement, moid. So you have to come up with some, and then if you're like, hi, like a normal fucking human interaction, they're like, oh, very original. What the fuck? I said hi. Oh, I'm sorry. I was polite. Hey, what's up? I'm sorry that I I'm sorry. Not to get too red-pilled on you. God, online dating sucks. I'm so lucky I met Kat. I'm so lucky I met her. To save me from fucking online dating. But I was like, okay, so if I say like, hey, what's going on? Or I make some kind of a fucking observation about their profile, they're like, who half the time, they wouldn't even have anything interesting. You're like, oh, that's not very interesting. All your fucking pictures are just you in like a swimsuit and bullshit. It's just fucking you at like a bar or something. Oh, I'm supposed to, what's your favorite drink? You have no bio. Oh my, I'm getting heated fucking thinking about annoying women. So I was like, okay, I need to have some kind of a line. Now, originally, the line that I came up with, I thought I was really proud of this. I would pose a conundrum to these women. And I would say, would you rather go the rest of your life without food or air? Which I thought was a real thinker. That was not successful. With the very few women who did match with me, which was like maybe 6 people over the course of like hundreds of profiles that I would like. My strategy was that I would just, maybe I should make a video at one point about my experience doing online dating. Because I wrote a lot of like stuff. I have a lot of recollections about it. I would like I would leave a like on, I wouldn't even look at their profiles. Every single woman's profile I would like, and then whoever liked me back, I would then like, okay, then I would look at them. I would just cast as wide a net as possible. And doing that, going through about 100 profiles every day for a good 6 months, I think I maybe got a grand total of 10 likes back. And so that line did not work out with the few women that I did get to try it out on. So then I was like, let me shift it into something else that's kind of unheard of. Let me be brave. So a woman would match with me, and of course I have to text first. And my line was, hey, have you ever heard of mule? And they were like, what's that? And I'm like, well, it's actually a seminal multiplayer competitive game from 1983 by Ozark Software. One of the first 10 games published by Electronic Arts that actually pioneered multiplayer gaming. And they'd be like, cool. Actually, they wouldn't say anything at all because they'd ghost me like most women just do. Oh my god, dude. I remember one time I matched with a girl and we actually had a really nice conversation. We were talking about how we both liked like funny bad movies and stuff. And it was kind of like, oh, wow, human connection. And then I thought it was going pretty well. And like I asked a follow-up question to something that she said. And then I just never got a reply. And that felt like shit. That felt so bad. And I remember talking to, like, even now I feel bad thinking about that. And like, I'm almost 5 years into my relationship. I still feel bad about that interaction. And I remember talking to my best friend, one of my like best friends, about this and like this specific experience. And she was like, if it makes you feel any better, she probably just found someone more interesting to talk to. And I was like, that doesn't make me feel better at all. That makes me feel, I'd rather she got hit by a car. What the fuck was I talking? Oh yeah. So like, no one's ever gotten pussy for having like nuanced opinions on like Warren Spector games. No one's ever known that for being able to talk about fucking Doug Church or Richard Garriott. The fact that being into film can get you laid is pivotal to its place in our culture. And the fact that video games cannot get you laid means that no one will buy. Like, the bedrock, the core base audience of Letterboxd is people who want to show off all of the cool movies that they watch to other people. It's people who want to show off and be pretentious for social clout. I'm just gonna say it, knowing full well that my wonderful girlfriend is a terminal Letterboxd user. What was I talking about? I think Toy Story? Why did I talk about Letterboxd? I don't remember. Anyway, Toy Story 3 is a perfectly fine movie. I don't... Okay, so it feels like a little muddled to me. In many ways, it's a retread of Toy Story 2, but like less interesting to me. It's like, hey, things are changing. You know, one day Andy's gonna move on, and the toys have to think about like the long term and where they belong. And I thought that that was done in a much more compelling way with like what's the cowgirl's name? Jessie, with like her backstory and Woody's identity of finding out that he's like an old valued toy. And I really liked actually the whole theme about who values you. Like, the collector dude valued Woody because of from like he wanted to put him behind glass in a museum. But Andy values Woody for like an emotional reason. And that ultimately, like, Woody, it like kind of inflates his ego. It makes him feel good that he's this valuable collector's toy. But really, he cares in the end more about his connection with Andy than almost like it's almost like a metaphor for social status, right? And I like that. I thought that was nice. And then Toy Story 3 is like kind of weird. It's a little muddled in the sense that it is bringing the idea of Andy growing up and moving on to fruition, which I think is a fine idea. But then it's like the plot becomes about them going to this daycare, and it's like kids are shitty and are rough with their toys, and they're gross and stuff. And like, yeah, I guess I wouldn't like that either. And then it's so weird. There's like a class struggle component to it. Like, Lotso the bear and all the toys from the what is it, the butterfly room, they all keep the other toys. They use them as fodder and pass them off to the younger room, the caterpillar room that chews up and fucks the toys up, so that they can enjoy a comfortable, cushy position in the society of this daycare. And it's like, it touches on this idea of like a class imbalance, and then never really does anything with it. It's just there, and then they escape. And then it's like, isn't it so sad that the toys are gonna die? That scene is crazy. That scene is so intense, dude. Like, they're gonna go to fucking hell. Their bodies are... I believe that when they go into that furnace, that their souls are destroyed. That's how it feels. It's crazy. But I don't know. It's really sad. Or emotional or something. Here's another like disconnect that I have. I remember when it came out, when the movie came out, and there was this big angle of like, the kids who grew up watching Toy Story are now in college, and now we're all going to, it's like we're experiencing it, and we're Andy now. Let's see, Toy Story 3 came out in, I want to say 2010. Okay, so I was 8. And needless to say, that did not really resonate with me in the same way. It kind of feels like a movie that's meant for the adult fans of Toy Story 1 and 2, which gives it like a kind of lame feeling in my eyes. I'm sorry if this fucking infuriates you. Oh, right, that's why I was talking about fucking getting pussy from video games. It was because, I feel like I have way more hot takes when it comes to movies. Like, I wonder if when I said that I liked Kung Fu Panda 1 the most, and that I barely remember the second movie, like, did that piss people off? I feel like I've definitely seen people who would be infuriated by that statement, which is really funny, because it's like Kung Fu Panda. Why don't you get a little zen, man? I feel like it's like a crazy... Like, okay, the next day after we watched Toy Story 3 and 4, spoiler alert for how I felt about 4, but we ended up having breakfast with a friend of ours, and somehow Toy Story came up. And I was like, yeah, I don't like Toy Story 3 that... Or no, I said, we watched Toy Story 3 and 4 last night, by the way. And my friend was like, oh, like, Toy Story 4 doesn't count. That's not a real movie in my eyes. That one doesn't exist. And I was like, oh, okay, so, like, we're getting political now. We're getting heated now. This is a very strong opinion to come in with. I don't know. I also, like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm with Doug Walker on this one. I do not like the ending of Toy Story 3. It is kind of embarrassing. So, like, the end of Toy Story 3 is Andy decides to give his toys to another little girl. Another kid who is, you know, she loves playing with toys. And, that's a nice idea to pass it on. And maybe, I don't know, maybe something could have been done more thematically with that idea, but whatever. It's a nice way to end the series, supposedly, till they started running out of good dinosaur books. Was that Disney or Pixar? I don't care. But, like, the way he does it is that, like, I'd be fine if he took out all the toys and he's like, you know, here's Rex, and here's Mr. Potato Head, and Miss Potato Head, and here's Jessie, and then here's like Buzz and Woody, And then he just kind of like, you just have a little moment where he kind of takes one last look at them and then just like hands them off. And I feel like that's all you needed to have a moment with a lot of heart that's like passing the torch in a sense. These are toys that mean something to him, right? And at this point, he's an adult basically, and he doesn't play with toys anymore, but he's looking back and he's kind of maybe seeing a little bit of himself in this girl, Bonnie. And he's like, huh. And he's just having like a little moment of reflecting on his childhood before he passes on his childhood things to the next generation. That would have been nice. But instead, it's like this fucking like production where he takes every single toy out and like does a little song and dance with them and plays with them in front of the little girl. And it's so weird. Like when he takes Woody out, he's like, and Woody, he'll never let you down. And it's like, dude, you're like 18. Why are you acting like this? This is so weird. This is so weird. And I say this like as someone, I didn't play with toys that much as a kid. I was an internet-y video game kid. But like I still have like one of my little childhood stuffed animals. They are still like in my room and stuff. And I think that like if I had to give that away, I would be like, damn, you know? This has kind of been like a little companion to me. This really means something to me. It's been like a little companion to me for my whole life. It's always kind of been there. But I wouldn't, even if it was like 17 or 18, like college age, I wouldn't be like, it's just so weird. I feel like I shouldn't have to go into detail about this, but apparently people just they cried at this. And I'm like, I'm just imagining like being the mom, like watching from afar, like, what the fuck is he doing with, this is a little weird. Like imagine just being the kid and watching a grown adult playing with toys in front of you, like for himself. Not even playing with you. I feel like it would have been one thing if he's like playing with her and kind of sharing it. That might have been a nice way to pass it on. But he's like doing it for himself. It's so weird. It's so strange. Yeah, I never liked it. And especially, again, when I watched this, remember when I said that I felt like I was a little too old? When I watched this movie when I was like 10, I felt like this is embarrassing. I felt embarrassed as a 10-year-old watching a supposedly like 18-year-old character doing this. And it's one scene, but I just feel the need to bring it up because it's like such a big part of the mythology of this movie. I don't know. It just feels like it didn't really connect with me. It feels like it's made for the audience. Like I don't know. It feels like it's not made for me in a weird way. And to be honest, no, I don't relate to Andy. After he did that shit. And then we watched the fourth movie. Now, I remember when the fourth Toy Story movie got announced, and I just rolled my eyes. I was like, really? That was when I felt like they're getting really desperate. We're going back to the Toy Story well, because they made such a big deal out of ending the series. I mean, one of the big themes, everyone always says Toy Story 3 is about death. They always say that like 2 and 3 are about death, because 3 is just like a rehash of 2. That's certainly like an extrapolation. Really, these movies are about change. The movies are about dealing with change. And that makes a lot of sense for things aimed at families. Everyone's been through changes in their lives. kids have been through changes, that you go to a new school, maybe your parents divorce, maybe you move to a new place, maybe you get a new dog, maybe just something in your life changes. It's always going to happen. You go through puberty. Change is just what life is about. So the fact that they're all about change in some way, I think is it makes it the core of the themes of these movies have always been dealing with change. And the characters, for some of them, it can feel like very relatable for an adult. And so I think that's why a lot of people say that they're about death, because that's like the most extreme change that we can conceive of. It's one of the reasons, like, if you, sometimes when people have a great fear of change, it manifests as a powerful death anxiety. Because that's like the most extreme place your brain goes to. They're generally about like change, and Toy Story 3 is like accepting change and moving on, and that in the long term it's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. We'll find a use for the toys can be passed on to the next generation. It's time for Andy to move on to the next phase of his life. And then you get to 4, and it feels like it's almost just like just spitting in the face of that conclusion, and just on its premise alone. And I remember seeing like the marketing with like the spork guy about it's like, and all I could think of was millennials posting on social media about like, what's the difference? What makes a toy come to life in the Toy Story universe? Is it like, if I just drew a face on a piece of paper, would it come to life? Ha. And I don't know, like all I could think of was, oh God, is this just a movie that's written by someone who grew up watching Toy Story and is like, let's do a story about, like a fan theory. Let's do a fanon. It was just like, in concept, it just seemed so lame to me. And I never watched it because I don't really watch Pixar movies unless Kat puts them on for me, and this came out well before I met her. So she put it on, and I was like, okay, well, let's see what this whole thing's about. And I'm not gonna lie, again, controversial statement incoming. I think Toy Story 4 is a better sequel than 3 is. I like Toy Story 4 a lot more than 3, in fact. I enjoyed it much more. I actually really enjoyed... It was actually a lot deeper than I thought. And I almost felt like I was betrayed by the marketing. Or maybe I came to a hasty conclusion based off the marketing alone. Toy Story 4 is not really about... Again, it's like change, like all the other movies. But it actually takes it in kind of an interesting direction. In some sense, it feels like an episode of the Toy Story TV show, where what's happening on this episode? Oh, Bonnie is she's starting kindergarten or preschool or whatever, and she's scared of change. And how do we deal with that? Well, the solution is that she, excuse me. She's scared of going to preschool and scared of being away from her parents. Very normal kid thing. And Woody kind of hitchhikes in her backpack to keep her company. And he can't really, like, jump out to play with her. But he's able to... It's very weird. It's a little contrived. He grabs some materials, like some arts and craft materials, and he puts them in front of her. So when she comes back to her desk, she's like, oh, what's this? And she starts kind of playing with them and just naturally makes this little spork character, Forky, who I wish was called Sporky. I want to call him Sporky. He's a spork. Whatever. They won't call him Sporky because they hate you. They hate you and your white children. And Forky is actually a much more likable character than I thought. I thought he was going to be annoying. He's definitely like a thing that has just been given consciousness with no concept of what he's even supposed to be. Because he's just cobbled together garbage. But like, he has like a nice little arc about like understanding that like it's good. He's trash and that's good. And about like his purpose is to make Bonnie feel comfortable. Like he feels comfortable in the trash. And when he realizes that, I really like that. Like when he realizes that Bonnie, I think it's the metaphor that Woody comes up with is when you're with Bonnie, it's like when Bonnie has you, it's like when you are in the trash. It's the same feeling of comfort. And he is suddenly motivated now to spend time with her. That's a really nice character. I like that a lot. He's very sweet. I like him. Funny enough, it's a movie that's kind of about being a parent. It's actually a movie that's about being a parent and like an empty nester. And I think that doing this as a metaphor with like Woody and this new character that he's got to like pass along to Bonnie, that he's got to embrace that this is like his version of the next generation, passing the torch, was a lot more effective, and that he can feel confident that she's going to be fine without him, because he eventually does like leave at the end. And I like that. I liked it. In the middle of the movie, it gets a little distracted, it feels like. So they kind of come back, they circle back to this thing from Toy Story 3, which is that Bo Peep was very strangely gone. She was missing in that movie. I don't think that there has ever been a concrete explanation from the horse's mouth about why she's gone. There's like a theory that it's because she wouldn't have been able to survive the end of the movie because she's made of like porcelain and she would have melted. I think that that's a little like... I think that they could have suspended our disbelief for that scene and it would have been fine. This is a movie about talking toys. I think it's okay to say that the melting point of porcelain is a little higher in this universe. I think it's acceptable. There's also like, oh, it wouldn't have made sense because she was like Andy's sister's thing and not his, so why would he keep her around? Or why would the sister keep her around? And it's like, I mean, you could have written her in somewhere. It's very weird. I don't know if it was an issue with the voice actress. No clue. But in Toy Story 4, they bring her back, which is like, okay, cool, she's back, and she's like on her own now. She's like Rosie the Riveter. And apparently, this is so funny. Apparently it's because, apparently this movie got a bunch of guys to be like, it's pushing the feminist agenda. Okay, man. Chill out, it's fine. But I will say there's a kernel of truth in that, which is that her presence in the movie kind of overshadows a lot of it in a way that's like just a tad too much to me. As soon as she enters the movie and she's like on her own and I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool for her, but it's like, oh, she's like on her own. She's doing her own thing. As a lost toy. And, Woody isn't really prepared for that. He's been, he's a domestic toy, right? But then it's like she is so competent. She is made so competent and Woody's so incompetent that like he really gets overshadowed in the movie to a kind of like a little more than I would like. There's just a long stretch of this movie where he is just absolutely useless, which is weird because Woody has never been like a useless character. I mean, in fact, I'd say that every single movie up to this point has taken him out of his comfort zone. The first movie is like about Woody and Buzz getting stranded away from home. In the second movie, he gets stranded in a weird place in some guy's apartment. In the third movie, he ends up in fucking like toy Vietnam at the daycare. And then it's in like a goddamn trash compactor. Like a trash furnace. Earlier in this same movie, Woody threw himself out of an RV to go chase down Forky and go on this whole adventure. And yeah, he might have like not always been the most prepared, but he's like resourceful enough. He's come up with plans. He's able to like coordinate with people. I mean, that whole plan from the end of the first movie where they like get the rocket and their whole escape thing, and like Woody is a relatively competent character at thinking on his feet. And I just find it weird how much the movie acts like he's just some bumbler who can't like, who's like, what's going on? Oh my God. A county fair. Like, yeah, he's never seen a county fair before, but like, I don't know. It was kind of annoying and at a certain point, and it felt like it was just to make Bo Peep seem cool. I'm fine with her being more experienced, being more competent, but it almost felt like mean to him at a certain point, which was weird for who is ostensibly the main character. And he doesn't even really learn that much from the experience. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And then it becomes, so, like, the whole thing is, okay, so they go on this road trip. Forky gets lost. He jumps out the window. Woody jumps after him because he knows that Bonnie needs him to feel comfortable, and that Forky is necessary to her growth, to her transition into preschool and becoming independent. So he finds Forky, and they run all the way to the next stop on the trip. He sees that maybe Bo Peep is around at like this antique store. Forky gets kidnapped. And now it's like, okay, Woody's got 1.5 days-ish to save Forky and get back to the RV. And he meets Bo Peep and all these other characters. Keanu Reeves is there. They hatch many plans. And that's like the dude. Okay, a couple weird things about this movie. It looks too good. Toy Story's always had a bit of a realistic art style. I never really thought about it because the CG, even when I was a kid, you could tell that the CG was, a little more primitive than stuff that was coming out. But yeah, Toy Story's always gone for a more realistic rendering of people and places. And you get to this movie and like, dude, the rain. Dude, this movie looks like it's made in the RE engine. I feel like Leon Kennedy is about to walk out. Oh my God, at one point there's like a police officer or a security guard who looks like a female Leon Kennedy. It's bizarre. Because I brought it up at one point in the movie. Yeah, it's almost like distracting how good the movie looks. It's weird. And that extends to the villains of the movie, who are like these dummies in this antique shop. They are legitimately quite creepy. I was like, man, they really hit that like Slappy the Dummy uncanny valley look for them. The way they move, the way that their heads are like too heavy for them to support. They don't really have any necks. So they run, but their heads just kind of like bobble from side to side in this kind of lazy way. It's very creepy. There's that girl she's like a baby doll. She has a weird vibe. Suitably creepy. I actually liked that part. I like most of this movie. I like most of it. It does get a little like, I feel like I'm a little annoyed with like how Woody gets treated throughout. I'm also a little annoyed with, or not annoyed, but yeah, it definitely gets like a little bit away. I wish there was more stuff with Forky. Again, this character who I was like, oh my God, this seems so lame. But by the end of the movie, I was like, wow, I wish he was in more of the film. I actually really like him. And I wish there was more stuff with him. I like that he was kind of like, he's held hostage by this weird baby doll girl. But he ends up like becoming friends with her because he's just nice. He's just like a friend. And I kind of like that. I like that he's just a friend. He likes making people feel comfortable. That's a very like sweet quality to have in a character. Yeah, I wish there's more stuff with Forky. I wish that Woody got treated a little better. The movie's also a little long. It feels like there's 4 or 5 different one last plan moments. Like it just keeps going. It just keeps going and going and going. And like we have to stop. And at a certain point, it seemed like everything was going well. And like, okay, we're finally gonna wrap it up and get to the end of the movie. And then like there's just another wrench thrown into the plan and we have to do something. And I'm like, dude, they're gonna leave. Come on. It gets really stressful. But yeah, overall, it's a little bit long. And I had, I've belabored the other points, but I actually do like it more than Toy Story 3. I would rather rewatch it. I think it's stronger thematically. I think it actually has an interesting angle on the theme of dealing with change. I like that Woody essentially it feels like a better version of Toy Story 3, because Toy Story 3 is like, we have to move on, But Toy Story 4 is like, how do we move on? How do we actually move on? Oh, there's like these transitional things that we can do. How do you adapt to being like an empty nester kind of a thing? Which a child can understand Woody's the struggle of the movie, right? But as an adult, especially if you've been through that experience or you're anticipating that experience as an adult, and you have young kids or kids who are maybe growing up and getting close to high school, and you're seeing them get more independent, you've seen them go through preschool and have to like separate from you. I don't think I ever had a problem being apart from my parents when I was a kid. I don't remember being like in tears or anything. I have always been very good at dealing with change. My parents have told me they've always been very surprised at how well I deal with change. Like when we moved, we moved states, and I didn't know anyone here, and I moved to a new school and a new location, and a lot of stuff changed, and I don't know, like I just kind of I remember I took it in stride, and I didn't think much of it until they brought it up. But even then, I can at least appreciate the thematic work that's done here, even if it doesn't. I don't personally like resonate too much with it as like, oh, I've been through this or something. I've been through these difficult emotions. But yeah, I generally, I like that. A kid can enjoy it, a parent can enjoy it and connect with it. Which I think is done in a much more elegant way than Toy Story 3 does. Toy Story 3 doesn't even feel like it's made for kids at that point to me. I don't know. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's made for the adults who grew up watching it. Toy Story 4 feels like both could enjoy it. So there. Those are my dramatic Toy Story opinions. Now, finally, I want to move on to the one game that I've been playing in between editing. Okay, I've played a lot of games for the video that I'm making. But you will see the fruits of that in a video soon. So in between doing that and feeling like shit and being sick, dude, I slept for like 20 hours the other day to fix my sleep schedule. I have been so screwed up recently. I've been playing Borderlands 2. Just on a whim. I had a little bit of experience with Borderlands 2 back in the day. Okay, this is kind of a weird connection. So, my grandparents knew someone who worked for NVIDIA, and they went to a conference or something, and they got an NVIDIA shield, which was like this. Their friends, I mean. The NVIDIA shield was this like Android machine that was like, imagine a big chunky DS. Because it was like a controller, you'd flip the screen up and it had a big chunky Xbox style controller. And a touch screen interface as well. And it was running Android. And they gave it to my grandparents because they didn't want it. Because no one wanted it. And my grandparents gave it to me, or my brother and I. And I used it a lot. And there was this NVIDIA like game streaming service. They had Darksiders 2 and Borderlands 2 are the ones I remembered. So I remember playing like a couple hours of Borderlands 2. And I remember liking it. And I just wanted something to play that was really gameplay heavy. And Borderlands seemed fun. So going back to it and kind of reassessing a lot of how I feel about the game from when I was like in middle school, I like it. I do like it. Oh my god. But there's some caveats. So, the biggest one is that I wish that I could control the volume of each character's voice independently. Actually, I'd like the option to mute every character's voice except for Handsome Jack, the only funny character in the game. I guess I'm most compelled to talk about the writing first. So, Borderlands 2 makes me think of how, like, I see stuff from the 90s that's just super 90s, right? They're saying tubular and shit. And at the time, I know that there's this like, oh my god. But I can look at it and be like, oh, that's charming, you know? How it's so 90s. That's so charming. And then I play Borderlands 2, and an achievement pops up that's called You Mad Bro? And I want to crawl out of my body. And I think, this must be how it feels for those 90s kids to see that stuff. Borderlands 2's writing is very hit or miss for me. It is mostly a miss. Not like an intense miss, but just like a general, it tells jokes. I don't think most of them are funny. I don't laugh at most of them. I rarely cringe. But I do cringe sometimes. It reminds me a lot of this phenomenon that occurs with, like, I think of Invader Zim and Team Fortress 2, where they have communities around them that love the humor in those properties. And they try to emulate it, but they don't really understand what makes them funny. And so they focus on the most blunt part of the humor to the detriment of the comedy. And basically, it's just really cringe. So, like, I think that if you've never seen Invader Zim, you might be under the impression that it's like, isn't that the LOL So Random series? And then you watch it and you're like, no, actually. This is a really smartly written, very cynical, satirical show with a lot of great humor. It might not be your cup of tea. But I love Invader Zim. I think that it isn't given enough credit for how genuinely clever and like fucked up it is. Whenever I think of the funniest stuff in Invader Zim, I just think of like the ridiculous stuff that they would do to children on that show. But if you are like a 16-year-old or younger, you're just like, what's funny about Invader Zim? Oh yeah, Gurr. Gurr is a funny character because he is contrasted to the other characters. Like, I've talked about this before, but all energy comes from contrast. Does that make sense? All energy comes from contrast. This is the same thing with Team Fortress 2. You look at the Invader Zim characters, and what is funny about them is because they are distinct. Zim and Gurr are actually like a straight man funny guy pair, which might sound strange because Zim is gay for Dib, but he is actually the straight man. Gurr is the wacky, goofy, random character, but Zim is not. Zim is, I mean, sometimes he said, Zim is an alien, so he's kind of like, he doesn't say things that are normal, but he's not just pulling random shit out of his head like Gurr literally is many times. Zim just has weird notions and assumptions about things, but he's very confident. Zim takes himself completely seriously. Gurr is a completely unserious character. The contrast between them and the fact that Zim like doesn't even skip a beat most of the time when Gurr starts talking about the I don't know, the tuna sandwiches is what makes the joke work. In the fucking first episode of the show, when Zim jumps onto the stage and he says something about what does he say? He says that like the desire to serve the Irkin Armada. What does he say? It's marching through my veins like tiny pants. Do not deny my veins. And the tallest just stare at him like, what the fuck are you? Okay. Like, that's the joke. It's not funny because he says, do not, it doesn't, that's not the funny part. The funny part is the reaction. Like, what he says is kind of funny. Just because it's so ridiculous. But the reaction is, like, that completes the joke. Same thing with TF2, right? Like, the funny thing about all of the TF2 characters, the humor, is that every single go watch every single Meet the Team video and just pay attention to what character traits they establish. This character's like this, but also it's contrast. The sniper is a hardened professional killer who takes his job very seriously. And then you get the scene of him on the phone talking to his parents about like, no, mom, what is it? He's arguing with his dad about like, I'm not an assassin. He's like arguing with his dad over, like his parents don't like what he does. That's like a very mundane thing, right? He has to explain to his parents what he does. Like hey, that's very relatable to me. I have to explain to older people what I do all the time. I had a very funny experience the other day. I was at my grandma's birthday party. It was just me and my mom and some like a couple that like they're like family friends. And these family friends of theirs were asking me about what I do. I haven't seen them in years. And I was explaining that I do videos on gaming. And the wife was like, oh, is that like gambling? And I had to like, I was like, whoa, that's a real generational divide. Oh, yeah, gaming to many people does mean legally like gambling. It's like, no, well, there is gambling involved, but not exclusively. We do have loot boxes. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the contrast, like the heavy is like really serious and he's telling you about his gun and all this stuff. And then he's like a big goofball who's screaming and laughing while he's mowing people down. The pyro is super blatant. He's this scary freak, but then in his head he thinks it's all sunshine and rainbows and that he's helping people. Basically every single character has some level of contrast where you're shown one thing about them and then something else. Here's a funny contradiction in their character. And that's what makes the characters like work, to use vague language. That's what makes them funny, is the contrast in their character. And when I play Borderlands, to wrap this back around, when I play Borderlands, I feel like the script is written by someone who thinks that the funniest part of Invader Zim is when Gurr says fish tacos. And it makes it a little hard to play. There is one character in the whole game who is actually funny, and it's Handsome Jack. And it is all down to his voice actor. Who's his voice actor? Hang on. Damian Clark. He's in some other stuff. He is phenomenal in this role because I read the dialogue in the subtitles and I think, man, this would be so easy to fuck up. There are other good voice actors in the game, and they cannot save the dialogue for me. But his delivery, he's got just the perfect delivery. He's just got the perfect cadence and attitude, and he every line, he knows exactly how to deliver it. He's a treat. I always sit my white ass up and listen when he's talking. I lock in for his life-changing lines. I wish I could just turn most of the voices off because I find them kind of annoying and unfunny. I actually don't even find Claptrap especially annoying. I find him as annoying as everyone else. Probably not as much as many other people find him. Just like, I just don't really want to hear him. So, like, this is, like, a weird problem for me because I feel like, in general, it's a compounding issue. Because I feel like there's just too much dialogue in Borderlands. What I like about Borderlands is the basic gameplay loop. There's a video I pulled up while I was playing. I pulled up the Red Letter Media episode on the Borderlands movie, which I haven't seen. But their description of it was really funny to me because Jay, who knows nothing about the games, was like, yeah, it was really boring and repetitive because every single scene was just, we go here, we go somewhere new, and then raiders show up, and then we shoot the raiders. And then we go to the next scene. He's like, I don't know if that's what the game is like. I don't know what the game is like. And I remember sitting there as I was going to a place and shooting raiders and thinking, yeah, that actually is what the game is like. That's kind of the game. And you know what? I think as a video game, it works. Go somewhere, shoot some enemies, collect guns and money, and do quests. And that's really where the game is at its strongest. And I'm going to be honest, like, this is a nice podcast game for me. There's a reason I literally just said I was listening to something in the background. I was listening to their review while I was playing the game. And so it's kind of annoying to then have characters talking so constantly. Also, what I realized, most Borderlands dialogue is just someone yelling at you. It's just, you walk into like an enemy location and it's some raider gets on the comm and is like, Or you go into the city and some character is like, or you go somewhere else and some guy's like, this is what I hear because I'm not like listening to the dialogue. And it's like, I'm just getting annoyed. Just stop yelling at me, dude. Everyone's just loud. Everyone's just being loud and obnoxious and not funny. Loudness can be funny, I think. There's a loud equals funny joke in the next video. But it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of annoying when it comes down to it. I think Borderlands is also a game that scales tremendously with what guns you are using at the time. It's part of the appeal, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, or a double-barreled gun, where one of the barrels is pointed backwards. So what I mean is, some of the guns feel quite nice to use. Many of the guns do not feel good to use. So if you're and this is a game where you are somewhat frequently switching up your loadout, either because you get something more powerful, or because you need a certain elemental affinity to take down a boss or something, or for a certain mission. And so you're switching out your arsenal on a somewhat regular basis, and sometimes you just have to use weapons that kind of feel like ass. Case in point, I had this revolver that I really liked using. And then I got another pistol that was much better in terms of stats. So I instantly jumped to it. I swapped it out. And then I shot it, and like, it felt really bad. It felt really bad to use because it was like, all of the sound effects were like air pops. It was really strange. It was like, poof, 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 poof. It just felt really bad to shoot things with, compared to the revolver. But I just had to kind of keep using it because I didn't want to put myself at a disadvantage. And as soon as I could swap it out for something else, I could. Like the importance of feedback, I guess. There's another gun that I was like, oh wow, this is really good, but it works in this weird way. Like it shoots the slowest projectiles I have ever seen. And this is like a pistol. This is not like a rocket launcher or something that's really high damaging and explosive. This is like a pistol that shoots out fire bolts, but they move so goddamn slow. And the hitboxes on the enemies are like surprisingly strict. And I'm just like missing all of my shots because of how slow this thing is. There's such a lead time on every shot, to the point that it becomes really cumbersome to use because you have to guess where they're gonna be in their weird animations, their weird fidgety twitchy animations in the next like second. But when you have a gun that's fun to use, it's great. It feels good. Doing damage feels fun. Shooting the guns, for the most part, feels fun. Again, it depends on the gun. It's got I really enjoy the world of Pandora. I think aesthetically, Borderlands is awesome. I've always loved the look of Borderlands. I don't even know how I would call it. It's not cell shaded. But it's got a kind of comic booky art style. And it's not a lot of dynamic lighting. There's some dynamic lighting because the game has a whole day-night system and all that. But for a lot of the individual objects, the lighting is kind of painted in. So it's got like an illustrative look to it that I find really appealing. There's a ton of detail in the world. Everywhere you look, when you walk around, you'll see, there's never like a boring vista. There's always something kind of interesting, even if it's just a junk pile with a particular shape that's been handcrafted by some artist. And I appreciate that. I like walking around the Borderlands world. It does have a bit of I don't know. It does have a bit of an open world. I'm speaking about the world as from an aesthetic point of view. From a gameplay point of view, they do kind of have like, I feel like I'm a little spoiled by the Arkham games because those games have such great open worlds. It is so much fun to navigate those games as Batman. It feels so good. Like the navigation is fun. Navigation in Borderlands is not that fun. You get vehicles, and the vehicles feel kind of like a Band-Aid for how large the environments are. Because otherwise it would be a complete pain in the ass to get around as usual. Oh god, wait, I completely forgot. So, speaking about like the characters and the voice acting and the writing, the character I'm playing as is Zero, who's like the cool cyber ninja guy. And when I picked him, I kind of assumed he'd be like a cool, quiet type character. And then, like, I get, like, a headshot with him, and he'll say some line that's, like... Sorry, I'm burping a lot. He'll say some line that's, like... Oh, no, it's like, I picked up a gun, and he says something like... This weapon... The weapon is my paintbrush. I am the artist, and you are my muse. And I'm like, dude, just stop talking. Please stop talking. Please shut up. Anyway, navigating around the world is just like, it's fine. You drive a car around, whatever. I think at worst, it makes the game feel a little bit stitched together and makes the world feel a little more arbitrary, because it really does just feel like, here are the 5 points of interest per zone. Drive around between them with not much going on besides that. There's some enemies on the way. You just run them over with your car. Yeah. It's fine. It's an okay aspect of the game. As for the plot, I do not care. It's there. Anything that gets more handsome Jack lines, I'm down with. I am compelled to fight Jack, so I look forward to that. But in general, I'm not super invested. Not super invested in the plot of what's going on. And other than that, it's I can't say too much about Borderlands because Borderlands 2. Because it's just a very repetitive game. Not necessarily to its detriment, at least not so far. I'm about 20 hours in. And it just you are kind of just doing. If you play Borderlands for 5 hours and you get bored, you will not like the rest of the game. It's not going to change dramatically. But if you kind of click with it or you like it, then yeah, you'll probably enjoy it. You will enjoy Borderlands at a very consistent level. I feel like it's a very consistent experience. So if you can try it out, and great game for a demo, actually, because of that. If you kind of like it, you'll probably kind of like the whole game. If you really like it, you'll probably really like the whole game. Because if they got anything, they got that core down. That's kind of all my thoughts on Borderlands 2. Man, I'm starving and I'm a little tired of talking. So I'm going to draw this to a close now. Thank you for, being with me for 200 episodes. Good God. 200 episodes of this bullshit. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, leave it down in the comments below and I will definitely get to it next time. Oh, please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not going to read your thoughts out loud. I'm hungry. My brain's not working that fast. Working on the next video. Making decent progress as we speak. You can check out my Patreon and my coffee if you want to support me. And yada yada. Bye.